What did your monster of a neighbor do? My monster neighbors? Well, I moved onto a dirt road with several houses on it. My friend has lived down the road his whole life. The people next to my house only came up for the summer and are never there for the winter. When summer comes, however, there's multiple potholes on the road. Curious, I asked my friend. He said the neighbors come up in the summer and dig the holes themselves in order to slow down traffic. So, yeah, that. My neighbor had 2 access roads to his property. He didn't live there, he just had livestock there, and he insisted on using the one that cut through our property despite the fact that it was actually the longer road, and it was a literal unpaved road through the woods. He didn't have an easement or anything, just assumed that since he had to drive through our property to get to that crappy lane, he was allowed to do so. He was also a total jerk to us for no reason. He never said hi, he got upset if we were too close to his property, despite the fact that he literally drove through ours every day. Revenge came when lightning struck a tree in our woods and it fell right across the access to the lane road, on our property. He hired a service to chop the tree up and told them that they could have the wood as part of the payment. It was some very nice walnut. My dad wasn't having any of that. He walked down with a copy of the sale documents, pointed out the marker that clearly separated our land from our jerk neighbor's land, and got the neighbor to admit that the tree in question was both from our land and currently laying on our land, not the neighbor's. And then my dad sent the crew packing and told them if they took so much as a branch from that tree, it was theft, and he, a lawyer, would see them in court for it. It's been over 15 years and that tree is still laying across the access to the lane road. He can still access his property via the other road, so he didn't have a leg to stand on to force an easement. Screw you, Jim. Ugh, my upstairs neighbor, who, long story short, got super heated about how I didn't see him in the hallway and say hi one time, and then blamed his outburst on the fact that laundry makes him cranky. He drunkenly tried to get into my apartment last afternoon and then asked if I had a problem with him. When I explained that his behavior made me uneasy, he called me passive-aggressive, and then said that everyone forgets where they live sometimes and he had forgotten where his apartment was because he was humming as he walked up the stairs. It must be so paralyzing to be that allergic to admitting fault. Well, there's a lot more going on with that guy than just hating being wrong. There are any number of things that could be analyzed by a specialist for hours, I'd wager. What an aggressive weirdo. My neighbor would chant "eggplant-sucking witch" over and over every time I'd do basic things like close the door or take a shower. He'd chant hard enough for me to hear through the wall of my apartment. I was far from being loud. That guy just had so many issues. I got sick of it and called over the landlord. The landlord tried closing one door and the creeps started chanting again. My landlord went over right then and threatened to kick him out if he didn't stop. Luckily, it worked. I don't live there anymore, but I still remember it vividly. My neighbors neglected their daughter to the point that she'd sneak into our house and steal food from our kitchen. Child Protection Services were called. For some context, I grew up in a rural area on a fairly big property. It had been a large farm that got parceled out as the owner aged. So there were 4 3/4 acre lots and my parents' 10 acres behind them. The house was relatively far away from our neighbors. One of the neighbors was an absolute piece of crap. When I was 8, I remember seeing the police lights at his door. Found out when I was a bit older that he had tried to murder his father over his oxy prescription. His father owned the house and the 30-year-old kid lived there rent-free. The kid did a few years in jail, then moved back in with his father who he had tried to kill. He grew green herb on our land and then threatened to kill my mother when my father and I tore it down. But he didn't call the cops. Frequently threatened to attack or kill my mother. I can remember multiple times when I was younger, him banging on our door and screaming threats at my mum. Other times I can remember thinking about the shotty in my father's office, in case our neighbor actually got inside the house. This was 8 to 10 times a year, occurring from my age 8 through 14. He's calmed down a little after a second arrest and some anger management classes. Nowadays, he just has massive bonfires with tons of loud music, and he leaves empties on our property, which is still a jerk move, but better than physical intimidation and death threats. Ah, Jerry. When I moved in, he seemed eccentric but harmless. Apparently, my landlord had a conversation with him and told him to leave me alone. This upset Jerry greatly. He cornered me one day while I was unlocking my door and asked me to come sit with him in his apartment. I don't think the place had ever been cleaned, and he had hoarder mentalities. He drank a bottle of wine in about 30 minutes, commenting on all of the sad things in his life. Luckily, he passed out so I could leave. A couple of weeks later, he got into a 3 a.m. fight with his boyfriend, which resulted in his boyfriend trying to get into my apartment for safety and eventually breaking into an empty unit down the hall. Cops were called and Jerry was taken to jail. About a week after that, the same boyfriend was over and a fight ensued. This time, it ended with them doing the deed very loudly. Jerry would flush things you're not supposed to flush down the toilet and would back up the sewage into mine and my neighbor's bathtubs and bathroom sinks. Eventually, he clogged his toilet so badly that he just ripped it from the wall and left it there. The cops came twice to my door to ask if I had seen Jerry lately and asked to search my apartment to make sure I wasn't hiding him. One day, while I was getting ready for work, he came into my apartment with another guy and tried to measure my walls for the renovation he was going to do to combine his and my apartments into one unit. But don't worry, he said, I could just live with him when it was finished. Eventually, Jerry got evicted, but he'd still convince people to let him into the building. For months, his mugshot was pasted on all entrances, saying to not let him in. My neighbor was both a monster and so very dumb. She lived upstairs and was trying to force me to move out, so she put her speakers on her floor pointing straight down and blared them at full volume. The instant it started, I leapt up in outrage at her audacity, but after a few seconds I realized, I really like this song. So I gave it one song, and as it's winding down, I prepare my outrage once again, only to be choked off when the next song is also a perennial favorite. I didn't even bother getting upset before I realized I liked the third song as well. She stopped at midnight when she was legally required to, and then apparently realized she wasn't getting much bang for her buck as far as irritating me went for effort on her part, so she didn't try it anymore. Mine ripped up and threw away my mum's sweet pea plant that she got from her friend who died of cancer. When she complained, the neighbor started ranting about how our garden is a disgrace and an embarrassment to the neighborhood, and we need to replace all the grass and plants with concrete. What a jerk. You know, I'm pretty sure Sundays are for my upstairs neighbors to suplex their children and push over bookcases. Same. I've got a 90-pound woman and a 3-year-old daughter living alone above me, and they apparently wear their cinder block shoes in the house. His dog went through our trash and got sick. The dog ended up needing to go to the vet, and he told me when he bumped into me at my old job, yeah, it was like $5,000 to get her back to health. You're lucky I don't bill you guys. Mind you, this guy let his dog go through everyone's yard and crap wherever it wanted. It's not like the dog escaped, he just willingly didn't care. The last time I saw him, the cops were in his driveway because of an apparent domestic incident. My lovely local lunatic disappeared for hours a day to kill cats and attacked someone at the local park. He used to stand on the footpath drunk every afternoon and yell at my husband about what a B-word I was. Once my husband told him to go home and he shaped up to try and punch my husband, who was about 50 years younger than the neighbor. What was my infraction, you ask? Well, he rang one day to be nosy and ask why my husband's car was home on a workday. I politely thanked him for his call and let him know my husband was sleeping and had a cold. Nothing to worry about. Apparently, I was meant to praise him profusely for being such a caring neighbor, and my husband was meant to follow up with a call once he was awake and also lavish him with praise for caring. Because we didn't do this, we got to hear about it loudly every afternoon until we moved several months later. Yes, I mean, as the saying goes, a good deed is not its own reward. The reward is everyone on the block lining up to give you a down-under kiss and tell you what a wonderful person you were. What a bored old codger. Get a hobby, dude. They yelled at me for entering a shared garage to get some of our stuff. Later claimed I was after his piece, which was stored in a weapon locker with a lock that only he had the key for. They were in their 60s or 70s at the time, though, and died last year. Mine screamed obscenities through the wall at my children because they were apparently talking too loudly in the middle of the day, then screamed at us through the walls in the middle of the night so we could see how it felt to be disturbed, regularly dumped his old food out of his bathroom window onto our shared backyard, A rodent infestation took place shortly thereafter. Then stopped paying rent to our landlord because he felt the landlord should have warned him that he might be able to hear his neighbors. Finally dumped his trash on our shared front porch. The landlord did not renew his lease, took him to court, got his unpaid rent money back plus additional payment for damages to the apartment. It was glorious vindication. Mine really partied too hard. As I got home from work one evening, I saw the neighbor chuck a beer bottle at one cop, then throw a punch at the other. Things didn't go well for him after that. I found out after the fact that someone had called a noise complaint because it was something like 11 p.m. on a weekday. This neighbor was a double jerk, though. He had moved off campus with a pair of guys from his frat. The other two guys were cool. We had him over for grilling and vice versa. The guy who got arrested not only screwed himself, but caused so many issues that the other two guys who were on the lease got blacklisted by pretty much every place in town as well. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One of them was a cowboy builder who even conned his elderly next-door neighbors into getting their roof done for 10 grand, even though their tiles were almost brand new. He then took all of their tiles to retile his own roof for free and put about 10% of his old crappy tiles on their roof and then abandoned the project completely. Don't worry though, we got him arrested and he had to sell his house to pay back his victims, although the cost of his house didn't even come close to covering the full costs. Another neighbor we had would stand in his back garden really early in the morning and then start shooting local birds with a crossbow when they woke up, and he put the bodies in regular bin bags and left them in the street, where foxes ripped them open and dragged dead birds all over the place. Now we have no songbirds in the area. It all started by letting her kids and animals run wild in my backyard. So I dropped about 5K on a 6-foot privacy fence that my father-in-law and I built. Then this lady had her water turned off for lack of payment and began taking her number 2s in plastic bags and throwing them over my fence. When confronted about it, she kindly denied and then took to social media. Here's a transcript of her Facebook rant, by the way, and let me stress that although this is an audio thing, on the written letter there are maybe about 1/3 of the words actually spelt right. WTF, just because you find a bag of crap in your yard, you automatically come to frickin' me? Why? 'Cause I'm not like the rest of you snobby rich mother frickers who likes to talk about ya behind your back, but kind of be neighborly to your face or really not even that. What, 'cause I'm a little wilder, younger, tattoos and piercings and black hair? Better watch it might cast a fricking spell on ya, and so what if I got people coming at night or morning, vice versa. Hell, witch can't even get her freak on, damn. And what just 'cause my yard ain't mowed every 2 days or every weekend, and I'm not spick and span, I got kids and doing by myself everything, so don't expect crap to be perfect. 'Cause that's what you think you are, I'm not rich and I ain't poor, I live life day by day and God put us here to love and be nice to each other, do the right neighborly thing, but no go to have the nose stuck in the air, snobby judging motherfrickers like yourself, and everybody's day will come and he will judge 'cause he can, and is the only one I think I should F you and every other law-bidden citizen bullcrap. Suck my eggplant B-word. Wow. So, I called the landlord and had an eviction notice served the next day. Last year, my neighbor said he'll bash me because I got his driveway wet while I had the sprinkler going to water my yard. I'm not even joking, he flipped out over his driveway getting water on it. He's a substance addict, so yeah. I mean, he must rage every time it rains. Literally, old man yells at cloud. Mine use our trash bin and ram it full of bags of their gross nappies. I so badly want to take the bags out and leave them on their doorstep. Please allow me to vent because I'm in the throes of this BS at the moment. First, they have 4 mini dachshunds that never shut the frick up. I can't even open my back door without these little dogs going off, and they just leave them outside all day, every day. I enjoy sitting outside on a nice day and reading, but nope, I can't concentrate over the ear-splitting constant yapping. Now, I'm a dog person. I own dogs and love dogs, but this complete lack of consideration is mind-boggling. Second, they rent, and I own, but the crazy wife told me that she owns a 3-foot strip of my property and they'll be moving the fence over. I don't have a huge yard, 3 feet is a lot of space. And did I mention they rent? I brought out my survey to say, no, you don't own it, and no, you aren't going to be moving the fence. And she continued to say that they had their own survey but refused to show it to me. Third, they seem to think it's no big deal if they come into my yard. I came home from work to find they'd moved their water drainage into my backyard. They'd complain about my tree and asked me to cut it down. I said no. They put their garbage cans in my driveway. I've witnessed the wife empty her vacuum cleaner in my driveway. She's blown piles of leaves that haven't even come from my tree into my driveway. Even after I put locks on my gate, she climbed up on a ladder, leaned over the fence and leaf blew all of the leaves in my yard and that were already in piles all over my yard. After that, I put up cameras and I have future plans to press charges for trespassing the next time this crazy witch pulls another stunt. She accused me of calling the police about her daughter's illegal car. I didn't. And then said that I put up a note complaining about her garage. Again, I didn't. She's called the health department multiple times on me for my grass being too long. It wasn't. And the health department didn't cite me. Listen, all I want to do when I come home after a day at work is hang out with my dogs and not fricking talk to anyone or deal with any crap. I don't know what to do about this lady. It's like all these little things she does just toe the line at illegal, and I feel like if I call the police, they're just going to look at it as a petty neighbor squabble instead of harassment. And yes, I've been in touch with the landlord. I completely cut off all contact with the neighbors, and I will now only talk to the landlord. The landlord himself is extremely accommodating and addressed the water drainage thing. The thing is, they're awful neighbors, but apparently they're not bad tenants. They keep their property very clean and tidy and do a lot of work on the house. She's just out of her gosh darn mind. Damn it! At least these awful people usually have the consideration to be equally awful to everyone, so that when the first complaint is lodged, everyone else they've annoyed comes out of the woodwork as well. These absolute monsters might be harder to dislodge. Oh my god, frick these people. I hate them. Busted by SWAT last summer. I had to call into work because of the barricades. There were no arrests, and I never really got the story on that. While we live in houses, we don't have fences around the backyard. They got a dog. They used to sit on their porch while the dog roamed the neighborhood. Then they'd just let him out to roam the neighborhood while in their house. In the winter, they'd put on a coat and leave him out for hours. Then they'll stand on their porch screaming, "Pete! Pete!" forever at 11 p.m. Pete has disappeared. I think someone else in the neighborhood took him in. Now they have another puppy named Zero. He's probably about 12 weeks and of course is wandering the neighborhood. We can hear them screaming the hell out of each other. So can people across the street. Police are out at least once a week arresting one of them, then they bail each other out. They've borrowed jumper cables and never returned them, then came over last week asking for jumper cables. My boyfriend told them that we already loaned them to him and they weren't returned. The neighbors then told us they were going to sue us for accusing them of thievery. Oh, and then there was the lawnmower saga. Last summer, they came over and asked to borrow our riding lawnmower. My boyfriend currently works more than 75 hours a week during summer, and the one thing that he despises is lawn work. So he made a deal. The neighbor can borrow our lawnmower anytime he needs it, as long as he mows our lawn each and every single time. That went smoothly for all of 3 weeks. The neighbor comes over and tells us that we need a new battery and that 2 of the blades are dull. Clearly, beggars can be choosers in his eyes. Whatever, my boyfriend goes out and spends money on a new battery and new blades for the mower. However, after doing that, the lawnmower just sat. My boyfriend absolutely hates leaving personal property out. He goes next door and tells the neighbor that the lawn needs to be mowed soon and that there was an agreement, and the neighbor isn't standing by his part. We get the usual sob story about how he's sick, blah blah blah. Boyfriend tells him that we're leaving tomorrow on a Sunday and we'll be back the following Monday afternoon, and that when he gets back he wants the lawn mowed. If the neighbor can't do it, my boyfriend will just mow our lawn and be done with it. The neighbor tells us that he's definitely going to do it. Well, no. We got back Monday and the grass was growing around the lawnmower because it was never moved. Boyfriend got straight out of his truck, mowed our lawn, leaving the perfect line between our property and theirs, and locked the mower up in the shed. Neighbor comes over 2 days later going on and on about how he was just about to do it. Boyfriend says that no, obviously he wasn't. He had 8 days to do it. It never got done, and why is he coming over after 2 days after we've locked it up? They ended up getting a ticket a few days later for the grass being too tall. They still never mowed it or took care of it. The city came out, mowed their lawn, and left them a hefty bill for it. They tried telling us it was our responsibility to pay it because we, quote, took away their opportunity to be self-sufficient. Rang my doorbell at 4 a.m. over and over and asked me to go with him because there was an emergency and it was important. I went with him and he took me over to his car and started asking what I thought of it and looked very proud. In other words, this guy rang every apartment in the building at 4 a.m. to get people to look at his new car. One of my fellow tenants in a shared house at university. Each was a self-contained apartment with a bathroom, kitchen, and bedroom. The guy started smoking green herb, which I had no issue with, but as I was studying law and frequently met with police as part of my criminal justice module, I requested he keep it to his room rather than the communal areas of the house. He obliged, initially. I then went home for winter break, and upon returning I found lines of white snow half done on the kitchen counter, even with a rolled-up 10-pound note and the semi-empty bag. I stayed clear, and later that night, at 2 a.m., heard a knock on the door. A guy with blood dripping from his head was standing there shouting, "Rob! Get your butt out here! You've ripped me off!" Turns out his habit had progressed to dealing, and his supplier, to whom he owed a cut, was the blood-soaked man on my doorstep barging his way in. On a near-daily basis, he throws temper tantrums, yelling, stomping, and throwing tools, slamming doors, and screaming at his family over some petty nonsense. He's a crappy person, I feel bad for his family, and I'm genuinely annoyed each time I hear his voice. What's the stupidest piece of advice someone has given to cure a disabled or chronically ill person? I have chronic migraines and have been getting about 15 to 20 a month since 2017. A well-meaning Facebook friend suggested I put a banana peel on my forehead because your body will absorb potassium into the brain. Yeah, my 6 different meds, physical therapy, rigid sleep and eating schedule, Botox injections, among the many other treatments that the PA, my primary doctor, and my neurologist all recommended, didn't fix my migraines, but this random person read the banana peel thing on the internet, so it had to be true. Dude, I feel the sarcasm. Like I've literally said, yeah, good thing you told me to take essential oils. You've just cured 7 years of chronic throwing up that 12 doctors and 9 specialists couldn't. Do people even think before they speak? Sometimes I wonder. I was told to drink a mixture of different cooking oils, like a cup of oil, mixed with sage, oregano, 2 different kinds of teas, and something else. Someone convinced my family member that that concoction would stop my organ failure. Another said I needed to visit her magical vet who'd know exactly what to do to fix me. Also said I should get off my pain medication because apparently that's what was causing my organ failure, not the string of birth defects that I had. Needless to say, I didn't do any of that, and I'm now post-transplant surgery, doing much better. Nowhere near perfect, but good enough for me. Family still offering stupid advice to fix me now, so I get irate and sarcastic at the mention of juice cleanses and foot pads that pull out toxins. Lupus here with bad photosensitivity. People just tell me to go out in the sun and exercise so I can get more vitamin D. My friends tell me to eat more to cure chronic nausea, which prevents me from eating. Vitamins instead of Ritalin for ADS. Also, vitamins for autism. Also, never get vaccinated because autism. My mum is so much fun. Ye old fascination with neurodivergence and somehow curing a mental state of being that most of us just sort of get at birth. Never change, crazy mom. Actually, no, wait, please change. Really, you and everyone else will be better off. Having kids will cure your mental illness. Fricking lol. For bladder issues, drink more water. Drink less water. Have you tried cranberry juice? It actually sucks since it's acidic and makes things worse, by the way. But my favorite is, have you heard of Kegels? No, I've had this problem for years and years, been to multiple doctors, and I've never ever heard of Kegels. Thanks, I'm cured. Kegels. I had someone tell me to put tea tree oil in my underwear when I had a monster kidney infection from chronic utis a few weeks ago, 'cause burning my lady parts would definitely cure that kidney infection. I got told to drink apple cider vinegar from a doctor. She then consented to order a scan. I needed surgery ASAP, turns out. My wife has chronic fatigue syndrome. For over a year, she's been dramatically limited in her ability to work, socialize, take care of chores, you name it, she struggles to do it. And here's the thing with CFS. You know you have it when all of your tests say you're healthy, when diet changes, rest and exercise don't help, and when you've been sick like that for a long time. Generally, the worst advice she gets is the well-meaning simple advice. Have you tried going to bed earlier or going to bed later? Have you tried waking up earlier or later? Eating more or less of this substance, going for walks or doing weights, or it goes on and on. It's not the worst advice because it's even bad advice for general health. Nobody we know is telling her to inject bleach or drink colloidal silver. It's the worst advice because it's so thoroughly condescending. It amounts to saying, I've made no attempt to understand your condition, but have you tried not being a helpless moron and doing this incredibly simple and obvious thing? If you know someone with a chronic infection and you hear about some research or medical trial or anything along those lines, they'll probably be happy to hear about it, even if they've heard about it 10 times before. But, I know you're sick, but have you ever tried being healthy? Will not make them feel better. Years ago, a fellow patient recommended a supplement she swore by. Went to GNC and it was pricey enough to cause me to delay the purchase. A couple of days later, it was banned by the FDA due to more than a few sudden deaths. I think I dodged a bullet. I had a family member tell me I should wean off my beta blocker medication with B vitamins. Without my beta blockers, I'm bedridden. B vitamins aren't going to do crap for that, plus most B vitamin pills make me throw up. Had a doctor tell me that my chronic utis was just mind over matter and that if I just told my bladder to relax, it would. Turned out the chronic utis was from nerve damage due to a progressive spine condition that would have eventually destroyed the use of my legs, bladder, and bowels without surgery. We all get the do yoga, gluten-free, accept Jesus Christ into your heart suggestions, I'm sure. I have PCOS and possibly endo. My favorite piece of advice is to just ignore it because it's all made up and in your head. Yeah, no, I have ultrasound and blood work results that say something very different. Everybody has had trouble falling asleep at least once, so everyone thinks they're qualified to diagnose and treat clinical chronic insomnia. Shut the frick up about limiting screen time and warm milk and not turning the AC on. I've tried everything you can think of in every combination already, but sure. Your solution is definitely going to be the silver bullet. I recently told my father that accepting my irregular sleep and wake cycle has been the first thing in a long time that's improved my quality of life and productivity. He immediately began to tell me that I should use that forward momentum and focus on having a regular sleep schedule so I can wake up and go to bed at a regular time and be a better person. Rare liver disease now on a transplant waiting list. You should take turmeric. It's yellow and you go yellow. Remember, like cures like. Do more sports. How is doing sports going to cure endometriosis? There are cells growing somewhere where they shouldn't. It's been linked to estrogen, but honestly it affects so many women of all shapes, sizes, and fitness levels. Sports are neither the cause nor a treatment. On a side note, the best theory on why some women get it was proposed by some American lady. Apparently, I'm doing the deed recklessly with demons and that causes endometriosis somehow. Specialist told me that I just needed to go for more walks. Took me another 4 years to get fibromyalgia diagnosis, then another 4 years after that to get diagnosed with 3 minor heart problems that were just enough to exhaust me doing nothing. I'm now on beta blockers and don't get winded every time I use the stairs. I thought all you fit people were sadistic masochists and that you enjoyed pain and feeling tired. I was checking in for a doctor's appointment for an unrelated procedure. The nurse saw on my chart that I have celiac disease, so she recommended I go to see a medical medium who, I crap you not, is a man who claims to cure chronic illnesses by talking to dead people. She said he could cure my celiac, an autoimmune disease that doesn't have a cure. This registered nurse actually wrote down his name on a post-it and handed it to me before continuing to check me in for an MRI. It was surreal. Yeah, a lot of nurses are into quackery. My source is that I work with a lot of nurses, and I've often had to bite my tongue. I know more than one nurse who opposes vaccines, sadly enough. I work with a nurse who didn't eat pork for religious reasons, but also thought that if you poured wine on raw pork and sealed it in a container, it would spontaneously sprout maggots. Like, that's not how any of this works. As a man who has nothing but respect for every nurse I've ever met, I wonder what happened that these people got through the pretty intense nursing schools that the ones I've known have had to qualify from. And how have they still had such crackpot theories about basic medical and nutritional science afterwards? It boggles the mind. This piece of advice was given not to me, but to my mother about me. When I was younger, I had an awful dust and pollen allergy and initial symptoms of asthma. It was in the early 90s and proper treatment wasn't available in my country, so my father would bring me meds from one of the Western countries. Inhalers, antibiotics, ointments, you name it. Anything to stop me from suffocating. Up until I was 4 years old, I was either coughing or suffocating, and there was nothing in between. At the same time, I was prescribed really strong antihistamines, to at least reduce the reactions. As meds worked on my airways, but not additional stuff. Rashes, sensitive skin, dryness, for example. See, my father's mum thought it was all a big scam. Had it happened now, she'd probably be an anti-vaxxer. But back then, she focused on the fact that my mum was just being young and wanted her child to feel special. Funnily, my mum is as sensory sensitive as me, and my coughing was driving her mad. She used to shout at me a lot. My grandma suggested it's all the meds that I'm taking that are causing my issues. She took me to the clinic and asked for an allergy test that I'd had done on me repeatedly when I was really little, as my mum had no idea why her child keeps coughing and getting chest infections all the time. So one day she comes home, a slip of paper in her hand, yelling at my mum that she's a liar and trying to throw all of the meds away. The slip of paper is from the clinic stating that I have no allergies. No pollen, no dust, no food allergy, nothing. My grandmother just keeps screaming that my mum is poisoning me and that she's a young fool. My mum was in her early 20s at the time. What you need to know about my mother is that she's little, but fierce. You wouldn't suspect so, she's so petite. She stands up and just yells, "How can she have any allergic reaction to anything if she's on medication that stops her from having that reaction, you idiot?" Basically, my medication was helping with large amounts of the allergen, so that my mum wouldn't have to vacuum every 6 hours, only every day. On no planet would I have a reaction to a tiny diluted sample on my arm. My allergies did subdue when I got older, and I never needed an inhaler to function. Anxiety causes some of my problems with breathing, and I'll never be a professional athlete. But I don't need any meds now, because it got sorted when I was young. I can't imagine what would have happened if my mum actually liked and respected her mother-in-law and actually listened to her. I once had someone try to cure my extreme depression by explaining to me that God will turn his back on me if I ever delete myself. Wow, frick me. I almost forgot that eternal damnation will wait in the corner. No more thoughts of not wanting to be alive anymore. Thanks, random lady in psychiatric hospital. People think all kinds of things will cure endometriosis, leafy greens, B vitamins, pregnancy. I also had a boss-turned-client say, upon hearing about me having surgery a second time, that I bring it on myself by not taking care of myself enough. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Just keep pushing yourself to exercise, building up how much you do, then bingo, you'll be fit and cured. I have CFS, literally the opposite is true. Also, yoga, breathing, swimming with dolphins, black walnut extract for everything I've ever had wrong with me, who knew it was a magic bullet, mindfulness, go vegan, stop being vegan, and changing my attitude. All these are things I've had suggested. My MS is caused by a food intolerance, and I need to use elimination dieting to figure out what that food is, and I'll be all cured. My sweet grandma can't seem to grasp the concept of chronic illness, and suggests all kinds of things to cure my fibromyalgia. The fact that I'm slowly finding things that work for me, things that I can do to improve or control my symptoms, seems to be proof to her that my disorder is curable. Yes, Grandma, I am improving. Looking back to a year ago, I'm definitely doing a lot better. Yes, I tried that drink additive you suggested, but it caused a flare-up. I wore the energy-concentrating essential oil necklace and it gave me a rash. That whole grain bread you brought me was tasty, but I don't feel any different. All her suggestions are usually silly things like that. I'm happy to try new things in case it does make me feel better, but it's a bit of a crapshoot. New things can also make me feel worse. A lot worse. It's a little painful when she visits and tells me she still has hope for me. Can that hope please be for realistic improvement and useful symptom management, instead of desperately trying to make me like I was before? I'll never be that energetic again, Grandma. I've mourned it, I've let it go, I'm living my life anyway. Please accept that. Fricking okra for type 1 diabetes. Yes, it's a good veggie, but the best way I've ever had it cooked is like the opposite of good for that. Deep fried in something delicious at an Indian buffet. It's really handy as an ingredient when not deep fried though. I haven't had that much success steaming it yet, but I will. To suck it up. You have no idea how many times my own father and mother have told me to suck it up and live with it. Then again, my mother did lie to my doctor and family saying that God cured my hearing. I'm hard of hearing, by the way. When in reality, it's gotten worse. As an extra backstory, I have fibromyalgia, chronic, and scoliosis that both make my life a living hell as a 16-year-old. Accept Jesus into your heart and he'll protect you from all illness. This medical nugget was given to you by a Jehovah's Witness at my door that I opened as I was recovering from surgery. I thought it was my brother with my pharmacy pickup. When I tell you that I have chronic daily migraines, please don't tell me about your headaches. Don't tell me about your sister-in-law's hairdresser, just agree that it's awful and tell me you hope I'm having a low pain day. That's the narrator's approach to people telling him their troubles these days. Most of us just want commiseration when we're suffering or sad. A sincere, "that sucks" is a fairly safe approach if you just don't know what to say and often find yourself agonizing over a perfect answer. They'll probably ask if for some reason they think you have good follow-up advice. I have EDS. I was told to just stop hyperextending and then I wouldn't be in any pain. I can't just stop it because I've walked a certain way for my entire life, and when I did try to stop it, I ended up popping out a joint. Also to stop taking painkillers because it was ruining my motivation to get better. EDS is incurable and with few treatment plans, so nope. Has anyone tried to tell you that you should try collagen supplements? Because that one annoys me so much. Ingesting collagen isn't going to stop my body from making collagen wrong, but thank you for the misguided advice. Dude, just be normal. This was said to me in response to my diagnosed depression. Eat the thing I'm allergic to train my immune system not to attack it. Just think that one through. And yeah, I know it can work in some situations, not mine, under medical supervision. I'm talking more about a coworker saying I should try a bite of her pie to desensitize myself. I'm mildly depressed, so I'm not sure if this counts, but someone told me to get over myself and quit acting like a depressed little turd. And yes, those are their words. Go vegan for psoriatic arthritis, fibromyalgia, IBS, PCOS, and CPTSD. The one that really annoyed me was the CPTSD, because apparently I was absorbing the trauma of the animal products I ingested, and that was the cause of it all. So there you go, it wasn't the horrible life events that I'd encountered before that point, it was having cow's milk in my tea. I'm a vegan and I have several chronic illnesses. If veganism was a cure, I'd be the healthiest damn soul. I hate when people think veganism and chronic illness are even related. I've been told to try meat and milk, like maybe people need to learn not every disease can be helped by super specific diets. To eat more. If anorexic recovery was that easy, then I would have done it already. Even when I was, as stated by a doctor, 3 days away from dying, I still wanted to exercise and do press-ups, so much so that I went and did 20 in the hospital toilet. I'm quite open about my AN as it's a disease which is often misinterpreted and often associated with the desire to look thin. In some cases it is, but there's a whole heap of complications that come with it. Fun fact, AN has the highest mortality rate of any mental health disorder, as far as I'm aware. A psychiatrist recommended vitamins for my depression that he conveniently sold. I didn't go back to him. Just to stay positive and pray and it will cure me. Also that my pain meds, that are the only reason I can function at all, are holding me back from recovery. De-stress, breathe more, pop an Advil, take a nap, exercise. For fibromyalgia, IBS, endo, migraines, and fatigue. Like literally, I couldn't be less stressed and more into breathing, and Advil and naps, and less able to exercise than I am now. I know all of these are a sliver of my self-care, but people and all of my doctors act like they cured me with these tips. I pick my nails and skin on my toes when I need distractions. My toes and feet in general are pretty messed up because of untreated trauma from childhood. I barely have any nails on my toes, can't grow proper nails. My doctor told me to buy some luxury foot cream and a luxury foot bath thingy, and then take a foot bath 2 times a day and massage my feet with the cream. I have depression, anxiety, PTSD. People have told me just exercise. I would, but it makes me feel even worse emotionally. Have you tried keto? No, I have a weird case of reactive hypoglycemia. If I don't eat a moderate amount of complex carbs, I will 9 times out of 10 lose consciousness before going into ketosis. Believe me, I've tried it, Karen. I was once told that my depression was punishment from God for leaving the Catholic Church, and if I went back, it would go away. It had nothing to do with the PTSD that I'd developed after being severely bullied or the family history of varying mental illnesses, apparently. Besides, my ex-church pushed me away because I dared to think that I could have nuanced discussions regarding different religions. They really just wanted to force-feed you their beliefs and you just had to blindly accept it. I wasn't very welcome for all the questions I had, in retrospect. The worst one that was given to me was sunshine for depression. To quit taking my rheumatoid arthritis medications, aka poisons, and switch to a vegan, gluten-free diet, aka clean and will heal better than those poisons that you put in your body. Yeah, diet changes can help with inflammation and related symptoms, not going to do crap about the fact that my immune system thinks my joints are problems. This is a fairly frequent interaction when people find out that I have RA in my early 20s. Oh boy. We're running into a lot of people who've had bad run-ins with the plant-based crowd, I see. I promise that not all of them are this annoying. It is generally a pretty healthy thing if done right. Just check with your specialists before taking it up, people, and don't expect a magic change. I have EDS among some other things, and I've been told to do yoga, literally the worst thing for EDS, to exercise more. Yeah, no, that's how I dislocate things. To stop thinking about it so it will stop hurting. To take collagen supplements. This isn't going to change the fact that my body makes structurally useless collagen. To stop all of my medications because they're clearly making me sick. And to stop wearing braces because they're just a crutch. No, they're there to keep me from subluxing all day long. My mother told me that God would cure my chronic illness if I allowed him to. Thanks, Mum, for making living with diabetes my fault. I have sleeping troubles. Literally, and no joke, the advice was, just sleep. After a brain injury, I've been diagnosed with MDD, GAD, chronic migraines, chronic fatigue, and dysautonomia or POTS. Here are some of the bullcrap various doctors have said to me throughout the process. You haven't found a job yet because employers can sense your depression in an interview. And no one wants to work with a depressed person, so exercise more. It's all in your head. Ignore it and see what happens. It's not affecting your ability to work, so why does it matter? A neurologist told me the numbness and fainting was because of my mental health. I was evaluated by a psychiatrist who said that's not true, and the neurologist didn't change her mind, just said, there's nothing I can do for you. Yoga for fibromyalgia. I got told to exercise. I was housebound at that point. Smoking green herb isn't the cure-all that everyone seems to think it is. Oh boy, where to start? My sister-in-law has insisted every ailment, including my fibro, can be cured with ionic foot detox baths, biohacking full-body vibration plates, diffused essential oils, NAET therapy, repolarized water, black cumin seed oil, charcoal pills, eating spoonfuls of coconut oil, pre-methylated vitamins. I'll add others if I can remember them. If this counts, a coloring book for depression. I went to a therapist in college because I was really struggling. High-stress situations with school and work, plus anxiety and depression, were not fun. I left the place with a coloring book. No coping mechanisms, no breathing exercises to use when I get stressed, A coloring book and some unsolicited comments that had absolutely nothing to do with anything. I'm saying that there aren't enough hours in the day to work, go to class, do homework, eat, sleep, and shower, and you want me to take an hour out of my day to color because you can't be stressed when coloring? She should have been fired. She worked for the university. Another student I knew went to her. She came back to the office more upset and with bubbles. That crappy therapist is part of the reason I'm on the path to becoming a therapist. I know I can do better than that, and I don't want anyone else to ever feel unheard and like they're being rushed out the door, or that the therapist just doesn't care that you're ready to jump off a bridge. What are your best examples of people exhibiting the Dunning-Kruger effect? Which is when people are too ignorant to understand why they're wrong. I fix boats for a living, and I can tell you there's probably no subject in existence where everyone knows better than you than boats and boating. To quote someone on a repair, "No, that's way too much for the work here. Tell them their deck is rotten from years of water seeping in? No, you're wrong. I take very good care of my boat. It's actually crazy." I called for a service on my AC. The guy comes out, says everything was fine and it was working in that moment, so I pay the fee and he leaves. 3 weeks later, the unit fails and I call another company to have a look. I was giving the story to the tech and I said something like, "The other guy tested everything, but that doesn't mean a component didn't fail after he left and before you showed up." And this guy was startled. He told me very few people understand that can and does in fact happen. Well, I work in IT and have had to have this discussion many times with people. When I was in high school in the 70s, I thought that I was a good singer. I sang in a couple of bands. Later, I built a recording studio and worked with bands, learning more and more about music. The more I learned, the less good I believed I was, but I kept practicing for years. A few years ago, I took vocal lessons from an excellent teacher. I believed I was close to being a good singer and just needed some minor tweaks, and he showed me how far away the goalpost really was. Looking back to high school, I sucked while believing I sounded good. My dad thinks he's the man at day trading and the real estate market because he once managed to make money on both of those. So he keeps buying more stocks, and he keeps making plans to become a real estate agent. He buys self-wealth books and buys into pyramid schemes. He has no certifications. Now he's in debt because of bad trades and pyramid schemes, but he's still convinced he's going to turn it around and become rich. Yeah, I've always been a little cynical and assumed that even if you had good instincts for the stock market, it's still risky, but it definitely sounds like what your dad is doing is just straight-up gambling in all but name. The guy needs help. My boss, who got fired for unrelated reasons. A few years ago, this guy, who's the stepson of the company's founder, president, and CEO, was made national director of sales. He was out visiting one of our job sites where we were building a new location and started talking to the superintendent and project manager. I heard this story from the superintendent himself, and I 100% believe this is true because the guy is a nightmare and the superintendent is a badass whose specialty is dealing with idiots. Also, the CEO basically confirmed the whole thing on a phone call 2 weeks later. So this idiot was saying, "Why do these buildings take 8 months to build? You should be able to do them in 5. The supervisor says, "The plans are for 7.5 months, with a few weeks thrown in as safety for weather, subs that don't show up, supply delays, among other things. We can't build them in 5 months. If absolutely everything goes right, we might be able to do them in 7. That's ridiculous. Just schedule things tighter and make it happen faster." That's not possible. I've been building these things for the company for 6 years now, and we absolutely cannot do it in 5 months. Look, just put me in charge and I'll get it done. You'll see. I've been working in construction for 30 years. You've never worked construction a day in your life. You have no idea what you're talking about. The guy at this point starts fuming, screaming, and making a complete butt out of himself. "How dare you say that to me? You have no idea. What gives you the right?" "Because it's true. Now get off my job site before I call the cops." Obviously, dimwit boss went crying to his daddy almost immediately. Luckily, his stepdad is actually smart and level-headed. Apparently, the conversation went something like this. "The superintendent said I have no idea what I'm talking about because I've never worked construction and he threatened to call the cops on me if I didn't leave the job site." And the CEO answered, "Well, he's right. You haven't even swung a hammer before. And what were you doing there anyway?" The CEO then banned him from visiting the construction sites ever again. A random person started debating me about the statistical significance of the work I was doing. He's studying philosophy while I'm studying statistical science. I did do him the respect of paying attention to him because there's always a possibility that I've made a mistake, but that wasn't the case. I work for a financial institution, so I have too many examples to count. Mostly people that try to argue math when it's done by our system automatically. Both my brother-in-law and his now ex-wife. He thinks he's going to retire in 10 years. He's in his 20s without a degree. Even billionaire tech startup geniuses don't retire 10 years after their 20s. She can't figure out how people know so much about the shenanigans she's pulling with her custody agreements, denying my brother-in-law time with his child, among other things. She thinks she's blocked everyone in the family on everything, but then she lets strangers add her on Instagram all the time and she publicizes her wrongdoings there. Yesterday I got into it with a guy who was raging that the new iPhones don't have cameras with, quote, more megapixels. Well, I design consumer electronics for a living, including some with cameras, so I mentioned that having more megapixels doesn't automatically mean the resulting image will be better. I pointed out that there are many factors that go into making a camera produce better images, and that the number of pixels is only one of them. I also pointed out that if you don't improve the other things along with the pixel count, increasing the pixels can actually produce a worse image sometimes. Well, he wasn't having it. To him, more meant better, no matter what. Decades of customer electronics industry experience couldn't hold a candle to his observation of, 10 is better than 20, duh. Unfortunately, most people don't want to learn anything from anyone who might be aware that they're sharing new information. I got lucky sometime in my teens when I realized that anyone who is accurately correcting me is giving me the gift of replacing something incorrect in my thoughts with something that is correct. My elder brother asked me for a copy of the Bible once. I said that I had a couple of them I'd inherited and asked which one he'd prefer. He asked, well, is it Old or the New Testament? I was like, it's both of them. Well, that's stupid, he said. They're the same thing. He said this very confidently. It turned out he thought the New Testament was just the Old Testament in updated language, like reading Beowulf in modern English, and it was surprisingly hard to convince him that he was wrong. He was so confident about this ridiculous statement that remembering it makes me laugh to this day. I kinda hope that someone listening to this also got their minds blown by this fact. I can see why he was confused about that if he was coming from a place of ignorance, but fighting over your error when you just clearly don't know from the outset is what makes him a dummy here. We resent baselessly defending something that you know nothing about, not ignorance. I feel like a lot of the smartphone wars from back in the day were just people reading off spec sheets at one another without either person knowing what they were saying. My coworker who ignores every stated protocol for someone with his job description. All he's required to do is gather the data to be entered about the customer. Each time he tries to enter the data himself, he hasn't been trained for this. Why? Because he's computer illiterate at age 68. The customer can wait 4 to 24 hours for the data entry to gain them normal customer access to our business. There's nothing immediately necessary for the customer. I've complained, he gets mad, he's quit, and then he's come back. He kept doing it. Boss does nothing. Meanwhile, to fix his mistakes takes 48 hours longer, bothers the IT person, creates more work for more departments, and the client has now received poor customer service. I mean, it's protocol for this very reason. Last time he did that, our entire department and the IT guy refused to help him fix his mistake. The customer repeatedly came in on his shift and asked why the perks weren't set up yet. This coworker of mine then yelled at me, "What was the problem with it?" And I calmly said, "I don't know, Bob. I'm supposed to be the only person who's supposed to contact IT. This situation happens when another coworker doesn't follow protocol. I guess you need to figure it out yourself." He walked away and in front of customers yelled, "Frick that. I fricking won't comply. It's customer service." The customers were shocked. I filed a formal complaint on him for disturbing customers. Guess what? He now complies. I post on the Out of the Loop Reddit a lot, which means I invariably have to deal with people who have, let's say, an opposition to reality. The most recent note on one of my posts was a complaint that I included too many facts and sources as a way of confusing people. For real, the argument was that I was providing so much evidence that conflicted with their worldview that I was obviously just lying to them, so I couldn't be trusted. How do you even argue with that? A coworker argued to me that he's not racist, he's just prejudiced towards certain races. I told him that's the literal definition of racist, and he said it's different. Tax brackets. In the US, personal income tax has always been a progressive tax, meaning that as one earns more, one pays a higher percentage, and it's designed in such a way that earning more never results in a net loss to the earner. Plenty of people insist that going into a higher tax bracket can and does cause a net loss to the individual. That's not only untrue now, it's been untrue for as long as there's been personal income tax in the United States. I know a guy who's told me he's against gay marriage because the Bible says it's wrong, but his reasons for being against it aren't religious. What?
Actually, the amount of people who don't understand what the Dunning-Kruger effect actually describes but use the term all the time anyway.
I work at a car dealership and people honestly have no fricking clue what they're talking about when it comes to their vehicles, but they'll always swear they know more than you. My favorite is when they say, "Well, I read on a forum that it's X, so why are you telling me it's Y?" Or, "Well, my mechanic said that it's in good condition." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My coworker is convinced that aspartame causes brain cancer, and when I told her it didn't, she asked me how I was sure I was right. I informed her I have a degree in medical technology with a focus in chemical testing. She then laughed at me and told me I was way out of my league because chemistry and food science are different fields of study. She has a 30-year-old degree in social work. We both work the same entry-level position. My mum thinking Steam is a virus.
It's only a virus to my wallet.
A very deep south old lady I was talking to once said,
"I'm not racist, I just think they,"
by which she meant black people,
"should stay in their place."
She felt the same way.
"I'm not racist, I only fulfill the exact criteria for racism,"
she says underneath her Confederate flag in the living room of her dilapidated old Southern manor, surrounded by long untended cotton fields. I did accounting for insurance policies. Customers would constantly ask for audits. Nearly every audit was done because the customer was just one payment behind. When I started at the company, I wasn't assigned audits, but was amazed at how many I saw coming through the department every week. Hundreds. Many of them were re-audits of the same policies too. After a couple of months, I got curious, especially because these customers would occasionally get transferred to our department when they became insistent. The first time I saw how my coworkers were auditing, I knew exactly what was wrong. Instead of telling the customer the exact date each payment was received, the audit just stated the month and if a payment was received. So January, yes, February, yes, etc., etc. Not only that, but they had a strict policy of going only 6 months back. Most customers had a due date at the beginning of the month. They'd send their payments out a few days prior, so let's say someone skips a month, possibly years ago, then they continue to send their payments at the end of the month. A payment that was due on the 4th but arrives on the 31st, and the audit will show payment received for that month. But boom, new payment is due 4 days later. I present this to my supervisor and he just did not get it. He kept saying, "But if they paid that month, how are they behind?" Because they skipped a payment at some point possibly years ago, and this has been floating ever since. This isn't advanced stuff. I took over the audits, it didn't even take much extra time. I sent an audit as far back as the late payment to every customer who had a request. We went from 100 audits a week to about 5. My supervisor never figured out how I did it. Worked on a group project as a final exam on my sociology degree. My group consisted of 5 people, myself included. This one guy, you know the kind of guy, he's done great before uni by being a suck-up to teachers. He came across as a very competent guy due to confidence. During the initial process of planning, he'd interrupt everyone saying, with resignation, "I'll just do it if you guys can't." Even though our competence was never really an issue. We made him write the entire chapter of theory, and we had to edit it fully 2 times because he obviously didn't understand it. The project is written in our mother tongue, but almost all the literature was in English. So the majority of the chapter was just quotes from articles, which he couldn't translate or tell the meaning of. He later translated indifference to alienation. He wasn't involved in any data collection and didn't understand basic math. When we explained what the hard data meant, he said that he didn't agree with us and just couldn't see it from our point of view, despite the data not being relative. He still had that "I'm better than you" attitude, and alas, at the exam, me and another student got an A and he got a C. He still thinks he's smarter. My dad absolutely refuses to acknowledge that Finland exists. Even when I show a map to him and show him Finland, he'll adamantly deny it exists. So I work on a service desk, and it's just everyone, really. Saying everyone else is wrong except for you might just be the best unintended example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. This one guy, who's a climate change denier, got into an argument about it with my friend. He ended up saying, "Wow, look at you, you got all liberal. You'll believe anything you read on the internet now, huh?" Please note that my friend was an environmental science major in college. Yeah, my dad told me no hurricanes hit the US for 18 years before Katrina. When I showed him Wikipedia has maps of every hurricane to hit the US since the 1880s, it's pretty cool, he told me he doesn't care what evidence I found on the internet. He shut up when I reminded him we were in Florida for a hurricane in 2002. I know a guy that keeps saying he wants a house that's done, as in well-kept, in great condition, and with some property. He makes $11 an hour and has 3 kids. He won't apply for another job. He keeps renting. All anti-vaxxers and racists I've ever met or heard about are prime examples of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm a Mexican girl now working in a tattoo studio as an apprentice. I get to use the place and practice. In exchange, I have to clean it and help with clients. Also, they pay me like $40 a week, and there's this tradition where an apprentice starts in a studio and they have to learn from someone else. Now, the thing is that they've got a lot of trash that shouldn't be on the floor. I'm talking used gloves, used towels, even pieces of metal from piercings and needles. This is contamination and dangerous as frick. In the moment you start a tattoo, you've got to be as clean as possible. At least that's what I thought. So I kindly asked them to throw the biotrash in the trash can, and they took it badly. "Since you're the apprentice, you've got to deal with that stuff." And I'm like, can we take a moment to understand that it's not hard to throw some dangerous material where it belongs? I know they're just teasing me, but heck, these aren't Kleenexes, they're towels with blood on the damn floor. Comments 2 through 4 in any video game sub on patch day. As a Helldivers player, I feel this in my soul. Some people really just hate change, and it's baffling to imagine getting that angry about nerfs and balances. I don't think the internet will like this, but an analyst of China named Gordon Chang. He wrote a book called The Coming Collapse of China, in which he explained why China would fall within 5 to 10 years. The book was published in 2001. Shout out to all my colleagues who spent a day training on SQL and Excel and think that they're somehow data engineers. My old roommate talking about how the world was only 6,000 years old and the dinosaurs were wiped out by the Great Flood. I brought up carbon dating and she said it was a myth created by the devil to lead people away from the truth. Remember that episode of Futurama where Leela goes back to that orphanarium and she's like a legit space captain and has good friends and is doing pretty darn great, and she's proud of herself? Meanwhile, all the other people at the reunion are like degenerates and addicts and homeless and crap, but when she tries telling them about her success, they just patronize her and are like, "Oh, that's so good for you. You should be really proud of everything considering you only have one eye." That's how my family treats me, except I have both eyes. To all my peers and myself, I'm successful, but anytime I cross paths with my mum's sisters and brothers and all their offspring, they just patronize me and talk down to me, even though by all rights they have no leg to stand on. They're just miserable people. Jail time, addictions, kids that they didn't want and can't afford, all living in squalor, but apparently because I don't go to church, I'm a moron, and if something happens to me, it's luck. Or someone feeling sorry for me, and that's why I get opportunities, out of pity. The whole thing is bananas. I once had someone explain to me that Superman could be the Man of Steel, but Supergirl couldn't be the Woman of Steel because a uterus couldn't be made of steel, so she wouldn't be able to carry children. I tried explaining that the uterus in Supergirl's body would have the same cell and tissue structure as the organs in Superman's body, but to no avail. From anyone else, I would have assumed that this was an anti-feminist comment, but from this guy, it was just a pure lack of understanding of how the human or superhuman body works. There are professional athletes who are experts in off-season sports moves. This summer, Antonio Brown was convinced he was one of those guys. I'm pretty sure Antonio Brown still thinks he's one of those guys. Antonio Brown is not one of those guys. My brother-in-law trying to convince others that coal was the most beneficial to the environment. As a bartender, I've had customers and staff telling me I'm wrong for doing certain things with drinks. One, floor staff telling me that there was no head on cider that he was bringing for someone. When I told him you don't give cider with a head, he stared at me and kept telling me that you do. And second, a customer just last week complained about getting a lime with her tequila, that only lemons go with tequila, and proceeded to drunkenly lecture me which drinks lemon and or lime goes in. In truth, you can use either lemon or lime, I've just been told lime. My mum thinks that using a tanning bed before going on holiday will prevent skin cancer. She then tells me that being an undergraduate doesn't make me smart, and that I can be wrong about things. Any conversation I have with client techs or colleagues about my politics. I'm in a conservative industry, but I'm a leftist, specifically part of the libertarian left, not a big fan of centrally planned economies or authoritarian single-party democracies. Like, they don't even have the proper vocabulary to have a conversation about politics outside of the very narrow Overton window of mainstream American politics. I tried showing one idiot a political compass to explain to him what people mean by libertarian socialism or left libertarianism, and he just started frantically saying, "You're making that up, you're lying, you're making that up," even as he couldn't find any of the supposed myriad YouTube videos that prove that you're lying. I also got accused of fabricating the life, works, and existence of fricking Proudhon by my manager, a right libertarian.
I would like to buy Greenland.
The idea is absurd.
Well, that's just a nasty thing to say.
In this example, person A is too ignorant to understand why the proposition is absurd. As a result, person A is only able to interpret person B's rejection as an insult rather than an astute evaluation of the proposal. What happened to the weird outcast at your school who everyone made fun of? Still holding his head held high while dressing up as Ishigo or Naruto and going to the obscurest anime fan meetups. Good for him, I suppose. He died in a fire. It was sad. I wasn't friends with him because our schedules just didn't sync up, but my best friend had some classes with him and they were buddies. The outcast didn't do anything super weird, he just had really long hair, thick glasses, and read Harry Potter all the time and was super poor. His parents had some family staying in the backyard in a camper van. They had daisy-chained a bunch of power strips and extension cords. It caused a fire in the house. The mother, father, and older brother got out. When the outcast didn't come out, his older brother went in after him. They both died. They found the older brother collapsed at his side. It's interesting, actually. When he died, it became trendy at school to pretend he was your friend before he died. Everyone talked about how they missed him and how he was such a good friend. Even the people who would mercilessly tease him did this. Most of these kids went to the grief counselor too. Everyone deals with grief differently, and maybe they felt guilty they treated him like garbage. But they still continued to ceaselessly make fun of my friend who had been his real friend, so I don't think they actually gave a crap. A kid I knew in middle school was weird, really into bats, wolves, and other things. He seemed nice and we all egged him on to do the wolf man, and then he'd growl and snarl and make weird faces. He also barely talked, and when he did, it was murmurs. He was sort of weird, but nobody was ever mean to him or made fun of him. We just sort of accepted and embraced it as a class. A few years later, after going to different high schools, I heard he got expelled for biting a kid. I can only imagine how that went down. Moved 1,000 miles away, learned a trade and did quite well, joined Aryan nations along the way somewhere, died in a motorcycle wreck aged 38. Oh boy, that turned real dark real quick. There was no weird outcast at my school. Oh, crap. Yep, I love watching realizations happen in real time. But there actually were no outcasts at my high school. Oh, gosh darn it. Got caught selling crystal at the drive-thru at a local taco joint. Good old small towns. He married a popular girl and became the most popular teacher at the same school. Oh, you know, just drove his car into his ex's home and then riddled her and her new boyfriend with lead. It turns out he's autistic. We just didn't have a word for it back then. Now he's involved with taxidermy. The kid got expelled and went to prison on 6 counts of arson 2 weeks before graduation. He lit 6 portable toilets on fire and is still in to this day.
Man, that guy must have really hated porta potties.
There was a girl in my grad class who was brilliant, 100% or more in every class and very motivated with her studies. She didn't have any friends and people knew she was strange, but everyone kind of left her alone or was nice when they came into contact. She ended up staying in my hometown, pretty small, only a community college with not many programs. I don't believe she ever went to higher education. She ended up self-deleting a year after our grad. A few things I should clear up. There were often bonus points on exams and assignments, and that's how she got more than 100%. She said she didn't want friends, and there were people willing, but she didn't believe in friendship. I also believe she had a very good support system at home, but she had an anxiety disorder, which she was getting help for. And finally, if anyone is in this position where they're lonely, please know that it can get better. It might take a bit of effort and reaching out, which I know can seem impossible, but people are generally very receptive and friendly. I made friends with her in school because I knew it sucked to be alone and different. I was exposed to mentally handicapped people since my mum worked at a care facility and cared for them. 12 years after we kind of stopped talking and led our own lives, she tells me she got married and thinks without the friendship we had, she wouldn't have had the confidence to do a lot of the things she had done and is doing now. I don't talk to her anymore, but she's happily married, holding a steady job, and had a kid last time we talked. Well, one of the well-known fat kids in my school moved to Alaska and lost all of his weight, and I'm pretty sure the other one decided to fight on the other side of the war on terror. I started working customer service thinking it'd help me build up my social skills. Fast forward 10 years, I still work in the service industry, have great social skills and also hate everyone, am broke and want to not be alive. He doused himself in gasoline and lit himself on fire when the popular girl he asked to prom declined. He survived, barely. It's been about 15 years and he's now unemployed and lives with an awful bully of a woman twice his size who cheats on him constantly. His life hasn't gone so well. To explain, the girl who rejected him was and is a really nice person. She had a steady boyfriend and had given the outcast guy no indication she had any interest with him. Also, I didn't mean to offend anyone specifically by pointing out the size of his current girlfriend. I just find it interesting that he ended up with someone more than 450 pounds who treats him so terribly. She uses her size to be intimidating, and I don't think that's ever okay for someone to do. Of the ones I know, one unalived himself a couple of years ago, and another is working at a gas station. Not my school, but my ex-wife's. Mousy little nobody, a year younger than she was, turned out to be Janis Joplin. Dropped out of 3 or 4 different colleges and became a furry. For starters, threatened to kill all 5 non-white people in my school, and then said he'd come back and kill all the people who picked on him. Thankfully, me and a few friends tried to be friends with him. We knew he was a loner. He ended up in jail for the unspeakable act. I was that guy, currently working on my master's in counseling so I can help other outcasts with developing the skills they need to become successful adults, including coping skills. He plays video games professionally now. I don't feel comfortable giving a name, but he plays Dota 2. He isn't a top player, but he's played in many tournaments and he has his own article on the Dota 2 wiki. I heard from him recently, as in like earlier this week. One of the weird guys I went to school with got charged with 50+ counts of indecent exposure. So for him, not so well. It's a sad thing to realize that the most populous answer is like a 50-50 split between they ended up doing really well and they ended up doing horrible things to themselves or others. I hope that we avoid a lot of this second group with proper counseling that kids might get these days, but I'm a little worried. Answering for my brother. He was a short, tiny kid in high school with acne problems and not the best hygiene skills. I knew he didn't have many friends, but it wasn't until I met a girl who was a freshman when he was a senior that I learned he was the outcast and he was made fun of constantly. And he didn't really have friends. In my eyes, my brother was this awesome, funny, great guy, so this really blew my mind. He wound up joining the army at 18, grew to be about 6'4". He advanced quite fast in the army and did really well for himself. He's out now, serving in the National Guard still, moved across the country and is working on obtaining a degree, and is well-traveled with plans to open his own business. He's the most outgoing person I know who can make friends like nothing and loves making people laugh. I knew he had it in him all this time, and it's sad that the kids in high school couldn't see that. Despite being more than 30 years old, she somehow managed to Facebook friend almost every single person we went to school with going back to kindergarten. Kind of odd that not only would she add them all, but they'd all accept her friend request. He posts space facts, unwarranted like. Rumor has it that she still runs around at break growling at people and pretending she's a dog, cat, vampire, werewolf, dragon, seagull, lion, jaguar, whatever she feels like that day. This was in middle school, she was 13. She chased me into a bathroom and bit me once. They work at a convenience store down the street. They seem happier now, even though they still don't smile or speak much. I was nice to them in high school, so whenever I go there, I always say hi, and they seem happy to see me. He unalived himself. I never knew him that well. He seems like an okay guy and kind of a character. He drove a hearse. He became a smack addict. When he tried to stop, he had a heart attack and died. He was a genuinely nice and good-hearted person as well. Rest in peace, Will. For those of you who are struggling with addiction, my heart is with you. It's a hard road. For those of you who think you're really funny guys for making fun of my deceased friend, or making light of the situation, that isn't yours to make light of. And coming back and reading them really annoys me. Here's hoping that you don't lose anyone the same way. In middle school, the school nerd was this kid. Let's call him Jean-Luc. It was a rough school, predominantly Latino and black, and he was this gangly, awkward white boy with glasses and an enlarged esophagus, so he was always foaming around his mouth. He smelled like dirty clothes, his teeth were always grubby, and his hair was always overgrown. He routinely just acted weird and didn't really have any friends. Fast forward post-high school graduation, he and I had gone to separate high schools, but he lived in the same neighborhood as some of my friends, so I'd occasionally run into him. He'd taken to wigger style, which was really cringy. This overweight, awkward white boy, same glasses, same foamy mouth, same terrible lisp and poor social skills, living with his parents. By this time, it was apparent that he was slow, so to speak. I have a cousin who's also slow and made the mistake of inviting Jean-Luc to a party where he got caught tickling his pickle in a back bedroom and then lashed out at everyone when they made fun of him, eventually turning a knife on someone, and the police got called. Fast forward to about 2 months ago, I was hit up on Facebook by some guy with a Latino name who said he was Jean-Luc and wanted to reconnect with me. I checked the photos and yep, it was him. I guess he changed his name to something more Latin-sounding because he thought that might make him cooler? Who knows? But he's not at all Latino. Anyways, I asked him what he was doing in life and he said he's in prison, but he can still talk on the phone and asked for my phone number. I declined, but asked why he's in prison. He didn't answer, but in his Facebook pictures there's a series of pictures where he's clearly had the crap beaten out of him, so my guess is he got in a fight that ended badly for someone and he's going away for a while now. In short, it turns out the middle school nerd was slow or mentally disabled. Everyone made fun of him for being weird, but he really had a genuine disability and probably shouldn't have been in mainstream school, let alone the crap one we went to. He ended up going for prison for some kind of violent act. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was the kid who was bullied a lot in school while also being bullied at home. Tried to self-delete a couple of times, it didn't work obviously. Now I'm almost 18, stressed out of my mind working a fast food job, going to school and doing theatre. I'm losing my hair and a lot of weight from the stress and exhaustion, but I still have a whole life ahead of me. Got a boyfriend who treats me well, and I'm looking into a career in musical theatre. So, all in all, I'm healing, and I'll get there someday. I had a pretty darn good life. Almost 5 years in the Navy, followed by a 33-year career and retired at 54. Many of them are still working. I've spent the last 8 years in therapy, I'm still living at home, I don't really leave my house except for the occasional late movie night. I'm too much of a nervous wreck to hold down much of a job, and now pretty much all of my contact with the outside world is done through Facebook and Reddit. He surpassed the entire graduating class in looks as well as tact and class. Right on to him. Maybe the bullying carved character into him. He was magnanimous at the class reunion. I was the weird kid. Now I'm an artist and a drag queen. Drag queen? You definitely won. Takes guts and a big brass pair to do that stuff. Much respect. Yeah, I mean, great for you. In my mind, this isn't too far removed from any other specialist interest kid like the ones who played Dungeons & Dragons or theatre, who was laughed at in school before finally leaving and finding their people years later. It's a wonderful thing to happen and we're happy for you fabulous performer. I'm browsing Reddit. He decided he didn't want to be alive anymore after being expelled from our middle school for hacking into the school computers and changing his grades. She started making adult films with her boyfriend and putting it on the internet. Oh wait, that's me. I was the weird outcast. Haha! One day I realized that having no reason to live also means I have nothing to lose. I hit a critical point where not caring about anything became not giving a frick about anything. Hiked most of the Appalachian Trail last year without ever having hiked before because screw it. Going back for the last leg this year because screw it. After that, I'm moving to Vietnam to teach English because screw it. I think he's a shift manager at Sonic now or something. Has a girlfriend, even. Miss you, Snaggletooth. The kid was a refugee and came to a new country and new school, and instead of welcoming him and helping him adjust, the small class just made fun of him. Now he's a deadbeat. I'm not sure if it was all the trauma of fleeing a country or the trauma of being a social pariah for years on end. And sure, kids get picked on, but he left school without any friends. I don't recall him being invited to any parties, even the big ones. Can you imagine, day in and day out, no one even noticing or caring about you? No one to share your feelings with? No one to tell about your good days or your bad times? It's one of those if I could turn back time things. I'd definitely have more compassion toward him. I wasn't the weird outcast, but I was never super popular. I got picked on and bullied just because when I'd started to fit in, we'd move. Then I had to keep starting over, new school, new people. Kids weren't as accepting of new people as they are nowadays in my experience. Anyway, I ended up dropping out and went to Job Corps. Got my good enough diploma and have been through many jobs over the years. Dealt with massive anxiety and depression. Through a series of very fortunate events, I now work at my youngest son's elementary school. I have various things I do there, from lunch cashier to reading tutor for 8 students. I volunteer in several classrooms, helping the teachers with whatever they need. I assist in running a food pantry once a week out of the cafeteria, and I just started an after-school Lego program with a small group of kids that focuses on building relationships with each other and teamwork while utilizing Lego. I'm working on going to school to get some certifications I need to become a preschool assistant next year, and then I think I'm going to go for some degrees to someday have my own class. I feel better than I ever have in my life. I'm making a difference in people's lives. That probably saved my life. Looking at all your other stories kind of made me sad that so many stories end badly or, well, ended at all. I just turned 40 and it took half my life, but I'm finally beginning to live. I read something a while back that really gave me inspiration to keep doing what I'm doing. Be the person that you needed when you were younger. I started doing all of my stuff because I wanted my son to have a better experience than I had. Now I'm doing it because all of the kids deserve to have that chance. Went to prison for unaliving his awful father. Got help, got successful after release, happy and healthy with a wife and 3 kids. Still has cooties. Not me, but my parents went to school with the OKC bomber back in the 80s. I was the weird kid. There were stranger and more mentally off people than me, but I had no friends and was bullied quite a bit. Girls would date me as a joke with their friends to see who could break up with me in the worst way possible. But I graduated early, saved up money, moved a state over, met my wife and got married 3 months later. All of this happened within the year I graduated. I'm moving to Europe soon to be with my wife. I'm going to a free college in Europe, married to a very beautiful, amazing Euro babe, studied law. I'd say that pain and suffering I was put through finally ended and helped me become a better person. I was that kid. From my first day of first grade to my last day of my senior year in high school, I was made fun of daily. I fell into severe depression and attempted to unalive myself a few times because of it. I never thought it would get any better. I had and have clinical depression on top of it, so that made it harder to deal with. I'd fake being sick by mixing random condiments and food in the toilet and telling my mum I threw up so I could get out of going to school. I had a few times where it got so bad that I planned to rampage and unalive some of the kids I went to school with. My dad owned a lot of weaponry, and I knew how to use them. I had a mental breakdown one day, and in the midst of it, I told my mum about it, whilst also telling her either I delete myself or all the kids hurting me. She grabbed me and cried, begging me not to be a statistic. Now I'm 24, I have my own house, my own car, no kids, by choice, a decent paying job and a boyfriend that loves me. I still have my bad days, and I still have days where I think about crap that happened to me in school and it makes me angry. I still have clinical depression and anxiety. I still have my psychotic moments, but I went to therapy for them and I know how to cope a little better now. However, I try telling myself that it's all behind me and I'm no longer a child and I don't have to be forcibly subjected to that any longer. Those people didn't matter back then and they sure don't matter now. I've had a couple of people from my school days apologize to me, and I see a lot of them that have gone to prison or are in prison right now, have multiple kids that they don't care for or don't want, are on substances, or are just generally unhappy. I take a lot of pride in seeing that my life is better than their lives. I guess that's all that hatred built up inside me. I switched from being obsessed with anime to being obsessed with cacti. I have a pretty okay collection. I only started in late 2015 and it's coming along slowly, but I'm pleased with it. This certainly wasn't the biggest compared to some of the rags to riches success stories that we've seen so far, but it might be the cutest, most wholesome one we've had, so well done there. Her locker was next to mine in high school and she reeked of body odor. She was odd and would often talk about her rabbits or would mention things like, she was unable to cut her hair until the new moon. Now, she's a gorgeous model, and I'm wasting my Saturday night writing a story on the internet. All of these remind me of Tyrone. None of his classmates liked him because of his stupidity, especially his teacher, who was also yelling at him, "You're driving me insane, Tyrone." One day, Tyrone's mum came to school to check on how he was doing. The teacher told his mum honestly that her son was simply a disaster, getting very low marks, and that she had never seen such a dumb boy in her entire teaching career. The mum was shocked at the feedback and withdrew her son from school and moved out of Detroit, relocating to Cleveland. 25 years later, the teacher was diagnosed with an incurable cardiac disease. All the doctors strongly advised her to have heart surgery, which only one surgeon could perform at the Cleveland clinic. Left with no other options, the teacher decided to have the operation, which was successful. When she opened her eyes after the surgery, she saw a handsome doctor smiling down at her. She wanted to thank him, but couldn't talk. Her face started to turn blue. She raised her hand, trying to tell him something, but eventually died. The doctor was shocked and was trying to work out what went wrong. When he turned around, he saw our friend Tyrone working as a janitor in the clinic, who had unplugged the oxygen equipment in order to connect his floor buffer. This was a joke, by the way. What? I'm an idiot, aren't I? Moments have you experienced? Someone told me their birthday was on Friday the 13th this year. After acknowledging how much that would suck, I found a long list online of every upcoming Friday the 13th for the next several decades to check that it would never happen to me. I made it 50 years down the list before I realized a slight pattern, and that my birthday won't ever not be on the 18th. Although, interesting fact, because of the day the Gregorian calendar started, the 13th falls on a Friday more often than any other day. Once I wanted to test my voicemail, so I used my house phone to dial my cell, and when my phone rang, I actually answered it expecting someone to be on the other line. I used a leaf blower on an anthill. I thought it'd be an easy way to get rid of it. I did not consider how terrifying flying ants are. I once painted myself into a corner while painting the basement floor. I had to crawl out the basement window, and there are still footprints down there to remind me of my Gomer moment. On multiple occasions, I've managed to successfully leave my keys in the lock in the car. I have no idea how my car has not been stolen yet. Went through a drive-thru, ordered, paid, thanked them, and then bolted before they even had a chance to hand me my food. Didn't realize my abject stupidity until about 10 minutes later when I reached for a fry and got nothing but air. Manager at Burger King here, don't be ashamed, this happens far more often than you'd think. I'd say once or twice a week at least, you're not the only one. Vacuumed half of my room, music in my headphones. The music stops, and I realize the vacuum cleaner isn't even turned on. Step 1. Obtain yogurt. Step 2. Remove lid. Step 3. Throw yogurt in the trash can. Step 4. Look at your hand holding the yogurt lid. Step 5. Evaluate all of your life choices. Hey, you sound like the narrator whenever he does anything related to food before he's had at least 2 coffees, so I can't judge you. That and dipping my paintbrush in my drinks and drinking the water from my paintbrush cleaning pot, although I've done that one multiple times while wide awake. When I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7, parents were building a new garage and just poured the slab, and I thought the concrete was hard enough to walk on. So I walked around, but there was one soft spot I stepped in. It ended up being right at the front of where my mum still parks her car and sees it every day. That footprint is smaller than my hand now. Shaving myself in the shower, so I rinsed the razor blade. I looked down at it and there were still some hairs caught in the edges of the blade, so I figured, I'm just gonna run my thumb through here to clean this off. Stupid. And it was still stupid when I did it again several years later. As an update, it feels satisfyingly good to know that I'm not the only one to have done this. Well, in Texas, there's a lot of scorpions. During the summer, it's pretty much vital to have some sort of shoe on. If not, it's like finding an 8-legged landmine with your foot. So I put the ones I found inside the house in an old Folgers coffee container. Around a week later, I thought all the scorpions would be dead, so I dumped them on the countertop to see the corpses. And the 3 or 4 I found scurried around like a motherfricker off the countertop into the carpet, and I screamed like a little girl. I once threw my wallet onto a stranger's shed roof because I'm an idiot. Walking down the street, playing catch with myself using my wallet, getting cocky, going higher, trying to spin it, going higher, lands on a shed, frick. One time, my dad was at the beach and there were seagulls bothering him. He decided to throw his car keys at the seagull, which proceeded to pick them up and fly away. He chased the seagull until it eventually dropped them, but he says that he almost died when he saw his keys flying away. Talking on the phone while packing my bag for the day. Where the hell is my phone? I work in IT and had a ticket for a user whose email was broken that I was trying to get a hold of by emailing them for 3 days until my boss slowly talked me through the situation until it hit me. Opening the door to a room to stick my head in and talk to someone briefly before saying bye and closing the door on my own head. I've done this multiple times over the years and I'm still always surprised when the door goes clunk against my noggin. I pulled up to pump at a gas station. I went inside to pay cash. I walked back out and drove off with no gas. I once accused a coworker who didn't get along with me of stealing my sunglasses in front of half the staff. We all know where this is headed. When I finished my rant, my sunglasses fell off the top of my head into my hands. I quietly apologized with my shades on. I dropped my straightener. Instead of jumping back so it didn't burn my feet like I usually do, I grabbed the gosh darn hot plate and held onto it until I put it back on the counter. I have no idea how my body didn't automatically let it go, but darn did I get burned by that.
On a related note, I frequently try to take metal pans out of the oven with my bare hands.
I bet looking at naughty adult material will divert the blood away from the debilitating pressure this headache is causing, and now I've got 2 problems to deal with. One time I was making Kool-Aid and I dumped the powder in the trash can and put the packet in the Kool-Aid container. There's something about the muscle memory involved with trash cans that causes the brain to just shut down. I've thrown away far too many spoons. I once kept pressing the same button on an elevator trying to get to the floor below, not realizing the button I was pressing was for the floor I was already at. I was wondering why the door kept opening. Needless to say, I felt like an idiot. On my last day of finals last semester, I was so dead tired that I walked all the way out to my car, about half a mile from campus, when I realized I'd forgotten my expensive Ray-Ban sunglasses in the classroom. So, naturally, I walked all the way back to the classroom where people were still taking the exam when my professor asked me what I was looking for. I asked her if she'd seen my sunglasses, to which she replied without a beat, "You mean the ones on your head?" One time I tried to pry apart 2 frozen hamburger patties with the patties in my right hand and the knife in my left pointed into my right hand. An hour later at the emergency room, the attending nurse had trouble believing I was a university student. I called the LAPD because the car window was stolen. The officer comes and rolled up the window. I forgot I rolled it down. I'm still full of shame and I can hear him laughing when I go to sleep. I live in a region that doesn't get snow often, let alone more than a few inches when it finally does. Finally, it snowed here and it was so exciting, except that I still have to go to work. So when I got to my door, I grabbed the handle and yanked, trying to pry that darn thing open. I couldn't believe it. It was frozen shut. Finally, after almost falling down and busting my butt, I called my boss and said, "My car door is frozen shut. I'm just going to stay home today." The next day, I had to leave for work again, and at this point, the majority of the snow was melted. I unlocked the door, got in, and started the engine, when all of a sudden, it hit me. I'd never unlocked my door on the previous day. I did not feel like a smart woman. I never realized why it's always the last place you look until I was 27. Oh God, Jesus Christ. Well, you're doing better than the narrator, who took until his mid-30s making this video to realize that, of course, everything we find is technically in the last place we looked. I am very, very annoyed at myself right now. I was doing laundry one time and I had half a load of whites left. Underneath the whites was a white blanket. I did the half load of whites and then did the white blanket. My girlfriend asked, "Why didn't you just do the white blanket with the rest of the whites?" We got into a whole argument about it, and then she gave me my alone time, and I thought to myself, oh yeah, she was right about this the whole time. I had one this morning. I went downstairs to eat the candy bar that I bought last night and had legitimately forgotten that I'd eaten it the night before. They just renovated the Wendy's I frequent, and I filled one hand with ketchup because I didn't line the spout up with the cup. I put a bowl in my glove box where my registration was, got pulled over by a cop. To clarify, I don't eat cereal in my car. To further clarify for the many, many people who still aren't getting it, it was a bowl for smoking substances. At the end of the whole encounter, only a ticket for speeding, and he made me smash my bowl, the cop said, and this is an absolute quote, "Next time, don't put your crap where you gotta grab the thing." I think he planned something cooler to say, but it just didn't come out right. Trying to make chili yesterday night, I opened up the can and I dumped the kidney beans into the waste bin instead of the drainer. I stared at it for way too long before my brain registered my goof. I had Texas chili yesterday night. Making these delicious, soft chocolate chip cookies in 8th grade foods and sewing. After they got out of the 375-degree oven, I grabbed the burning tray, not having the patience to wait. Clenched onto it because I was in shock, and then got carted in front of the whole class all in a matter of 40 to 45 seconds. Had blisters on every finger. Had a date last week. The girl came over. I cooked. While we're eating and talking, conversation switches over to methods of opening wine bottles. I told her about the trick where you put it in your shoe and bang the bottom against a wall, and I grabbed the bottle of red that was on the table to demonstrate. The bottle that I'd just opened 30 seconds earlier. And now what I'm known for on the internet is how I poured wine all over myself. I was washing dishes and I had an itch in my ear. Gave myself a cosmic wet willy. Back in college, I fished a massive number 2 out of the toilet and put it in the freezer to prove to one of my friends how big it was. This was after the invention of camera phones. Ugh. When I was young, I wanted to grow up to be a fire truck. Wiped my butt with poison oak. Sounds like a real pain in the butt, right? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This may be my first time tripping, but are you certain you want to be drinking? I asked a friend the legitimate question while waiting for the acid to kick in. The extremely hoppy beer and Camel Wides he had been smoking eventually caught up with his asthma. After an hour of solid wheezing and no help from inhalers, I finally drove him to the hospital for the steroid treatment. Fricking idiot. In high school, I thought my friend's mace sprayer was a Bianca breath freshener. We were on our way to ski and I was in the back of a full-sized station wagon. I suffered in silence for God knows how long because I didn't want my friends to think less of me. I remember when the stream hit that back of my throat, the most excruciating pain. I buckled over and internalized said pain. My eyes were watering and I curled up in the fetal position and rode the pain out. I might not have been very quiet and my friends maybe did notice, but because I was trying to tough it out, they didn't say or do anything. I was at a souvenir shop last year and there was a bowl full of candy. Candy-coated chocolate designed to look like pebbles. Near the register, there was a little spoon in the bowl for people to pick up some candy, place it in their hand, and then eat it. In my absent-mindedness, I eliminated the middleman and just put the whole spoon in my mouth. I was 26 years old. I'll never forget the look of utter disbelief on the cashier's face as I realized what I had done. In retrospect, all the times when women I really liked clearly wanted to sleep with me, and I stood around completely oblivious to the cues and then realized what had happened months later. My lord, I am not a smart man. Playing Ultimate Frisbee on campus at the University of Arizona, I overran a throw and tried to slow down by jumping into and hoping to spring off of the edge of a raised cactus garden. But instead, I overshot the edge and ran into a small, wide, and very dense cola cactus. My balance was lost and I had already got thorns in my legs. I was left flailing with only two choices. A. Step forward onto more cacti, or B. Put my hands down to save my fall and recoil from there. I chose B and popped off yelling in pain. 5 seconds later, I was surrounded by friends pulling thorns out of my arms and legs. One genius ran to the campus bookstore and bought Elmer's glue. It's an Arizona trick, you let the glue dry and peel it off, it takes the thorns with it. I ended up pulling a 3-inch thorn from the soft spot between my thumb and pointer finger in absolute horror. Eventually, I got about 90% of them out and was able to get home. In short, cactus. Ow. Oh, and as an epilogue, one friend, while helping pull out the thorns, said, "You'd better get laid tonight after all this." I laughed, it had been a while and we'll leave it at that, and said, okay. Sure enough, he was right. I had a fantastic evening. In college, a girl at the campus coffee shop I'd been to maybe twice told me she noticed it seemed like I liked the breakfast there, and smilingly asked why my girlfriend wouldn't cook me breakfast. I responded something like, "Even if I had a girlfriend, I live in a dorm with no kitchen. No one cooks there. I eat cereal." I felt like Dwight Schrute about a week later when I realized what was happening there. As a bit of background, I never met my grandpa. He died before I was born. However, I knew his siblings and they're a very close part of my family. So about a month ago, my great-grandma died. On Facebook, someone posted an old picture of her and her children. My boyfriend asked me who was in the picture, and I told him, "This is my great-uncle and that's my great-aunt, but I have no idea who that other kid is." About 20 minutes later, it clicked and I yelled out, "That other kid was my grandpa!" I got involved in an argument between my then-girlfriend and my mother. The narrator assumes that this submission was made in the last remaining seconds of the writer's existence, while he held the door back against the assault of both irritated primary females in his life. Rest in peace, my friend, and thank you for submitting this cautionary tale for us. I was sipping some tea, holding it in my hand, and the condensation of the glass made my hand wet. I thought, I want to dry that off, and I attempted to get a napkin, with the same hand. So I dropped my tea and it clattered to the table. I think I need to step out of the gene pool. Right, I forgot to say I'm in the US South where we have iced tea. That's right, cold tea. Went on a group date with an identical twin. I got there early, so it was just me and the twins. After 10 minutes, they ask, "You can tell us apart, right?" "Yep, you're X and you're Y." "Nope, got that wrong." The pond near my parents' house was frozen. Stupid me, having never seen ice before and having just moved over from Vietnam at the time, decided to walk on it to see if it was really frozen. That was a cold, embarrassing day. I once tried pressing what looked like the push button of a faucet when I went to wash my hands after using a public bathroom. It didn't do anything, it was just a metal pipe. Then I saw someone else put his hands under the faucet next to me and water came out. It was a sensor type all along. My mum and I needed to take my car to the shop to get it fixed. Our plan was we could drive separately there, and then we'd drive back together in the same car. Typical situation, right? Well, we got about halfway to the shop when we realized we were in the same car already and forgot to actually drive my car to the shop as well. In short, went to drive my car to the shop to be fixed without my car. I was at a 7-Eleven and I had my drink on the counter while fixing hot dogs. I went to take a drink, but instead of Coke, I was surprised when I poured relish into my mouth. Forgot I was about to put some on a hot dog, and the surprise caused me to spit everywhere and spill a crap ton on the floor. I drove my car for a solid month with what I thought was the battery light on. I got it checked multiple times at multiple places, and everywhere said the battery was fine. It turns out it was my coolant light. I was once cutting something for a school project with an X-Acto knife using my leg as a table. I looked down and realized what a tragedy it would be if I were to cut my shorts. Luckily, I only needed a band-aid when I cut my leg. I was the pastry chef at a restaurant with a foul-mouthed, extremely short-tempered chef who was actually a cool dude and a very talented guy beneath all the bluster. The local farmer's market was setting up outside and he asked if I wanted anything for dessert specials. I asked for cherries. I fricking love cherries and they were in season at the time. He said okay and left. He came back about half an hour later and put a big full farmer's market sack of cherries on my counter and asked me to juice them. I'd planned on baking them into something or maybe making a sorbet, but hell, if my chef wanted me to make cherry juice instead, that's cool too. So I asked, wait, how do I juice them? He says, use the juicer? The citrus juicer? Really? Yeah, the one you were using to juice oranges not even 2 hours ago. I had no idea how one would go about using a citrus juicer to juice cherries. And the last thing I wanted was this guy jumping down my throat over asking too many dumb questions or rage-hurling lemons across the kitchen with enough force to shatter soap dispensers they came into contact with. I tried to choose my words as carefully as possible. Do I juice them like oranges? Yes. Could you come over here and demo it for me when you're not too busy? Yes, I will come over and show you how to do it. I'll be back in a minute. I just heaved a sigh of relief and decided a handful of fresh cherries would be the best thing to soothe my jangled nerves. I opened the bag and it was not full of cherries. It was full of blood oranges, which of course would juice just like the regular ones. I once waved my hands under a faucet for a substantial amount of time before realizing I needed to turn it on manually. As a man who's been accustomed to an e-reader and now taps books while reading to try to change the font and size, I sympathize with being ruined by modern amenities. Made a pressure bomb with water and dry ice in a physics lab one time. It was balanced on a stool in the middle of the room, and we were all terrified when it pressurized and didn't explode. We tried knocking it off the stool, it still didn't go off. I went over and picked it up. Must have been adrenaline preventing me from thinking clearly because someone handed me a knife and said that I should make a little hole and use the pressure to spray the water out at high speeds. Result? No crap, the thing exploded in my hands. Couldn't hear anything for about 15 seconds, and my whole chest was a tad bruised. But I turned out fine. Immediately had the moment of, well, that was really stupid. Dumbest thing hands down I've ever done, and I did it with some of the smartest people I know cheering me on. Not sure if somehow nobody realized what was going to happen or if they just wanted to see me do it. In short, I detonated a pressure bomb in my hands. I ate fish food. I don't know why I thought that would ever be a good idea, but the second it hit my tongue, I was chucking up. Like I literally had to dash to the toilet and projectile spew. Because I decided to eat fish food. My brother bet me that I couldn't set the trigger off on a rat trap without getting caught in it. Think of a bear trap, but smaller and without teeth. I did not win. What do restaurants do with customers who are too broke to pay for their food? I worked in a place where a guy left to go to the ATM, they don't take credit cards, and he left his date there and never came back for her. The owner felt bad and just let her go. Apparently an employee had to give her a ride home. I definitely wouldn't play dumb in a bar for 3 hours to get a free meal, so I believe her. When that happens, I comp it and tell them to come back and pay me when they can. Don't worry about it. Either I gain a customer for life, or I don't. But things happened, and it's hard enough to be a person on the planet without being scared that someone's going to get ya for making a mistake. One time I was on a date and my card wouldn't work. They had some ancient piece of crap debit machine. They looked at me as if I was the leader of the Third Reich when my debit didn't work. And before I could pull out the spare cash, with the foresight to prepare for anything, the woman behind the counter starts mouthing me off, telling me I am what's wrong with this world and another bum looking for free food. I'm not a restaurant owner, however, our owner likes to hold meetings and the same topic was brought up. He brought up the story of how a business meeting was being held at their restaurant. A guy offered to pay for everyone's meals, time came to pay and the card was denied. At our restaurant, we're to say everything is our fault. The server came up to the guy and said that our machines didn't read the card correctly, and it was our fault. They had the guy give them their address and they mailed him the tab later on. On the way out, the guy came back and thanked the server and the manager for not embarrassing him in front of his co-workers. Hospitality is the best thing at our restaurant and it's highly appreciated by our guests. I once had to leave my younger brother crying in a restaurant while I drove home to get my wallet. I'd just turned 16 and he was almost 10. I'd gotten my driver's license and wanted to take my baby bro to get a burger and milkshake. I came back and he was drinking another milkshake and wearing a silly chef's hat. It made friends. I paid the bill and went home. The manager had threatened to sell him into slavery, but I just assumed he was joking. I don't know how to feel about this one, but at least it seems like even though they were fine with intimidating the crap out of a poor teen who was taking his bro out for lunch, they treated said bro like a king. Two sides of a coin. My father has a bagel store/deli. He's been known to just tell people to take the food and have a good day, especially when the town was out of power for a week after Hurricane Sandy. His credit card machine was down, he had a generator but no internet, and ATMs were down all over the place. Everyone except one came back and paid on their own. Some paid extra and thanked him for being trusting. The word of mouth has been great for business. For the guy who didn't come back, my dad was out $3.75 for a Taylor ham, egg and cheese. No big deal. No held ID, no cop calls, just trust. It's come up a few times, yeah, my dad is an immigrant to the US. He came from Egypt in 1980 and has been in the bagel business in northern New Jersey for almost 25 years now. His bagels are done the New York style, kettle boiled before baking, and he's always believed that the most important thing one can possess is their word. Though he's never uttered the following phrase, I'm sure he'd agree. All I've got in the world are my word and my balls, and I don't break neither for no one. I used to work at a TGI Fridays in an urban neighborhood. On Friday nights, things would get rowdy, and tons of people would come in and switch tables mid-meal to talk to friends at other tables. It got very confusing which patron was ordering which food at which table, and you had to give the check at the end. One night I had a six-top that ended up entirely empty and no one had paid the $200 bill. I located one person who knew and had been at the table earlier and asked him who I should give the bill to. He claimed he had never been at the table and called me a racist. I'm white and he was black, and he tried to leave. I was 100% sure he had ordered at least one meal and one drink at the empty table, so I got security before he got out the door. We always had 3 security guards there on weekend nights. The guards detained him and called the police. The guy started pointing out other guys he said were at the table with him and should share in the bill. Everyone was pointing fingers at each other, but no one would pay a cent. Finally, the cops arrived. Well, one cop, a 4'11" female. She took one look at the situation and said, "If this bill isn't paid in the next 5 minutes, someone's going to jail." They all dug into their pockets and 5 minutes later, I had the $200 in 5s, 1s, and coins. Obviously, no tip. I once found myself at a walk-up Dairy Queen. I ordered a medium twist cone with a crunch coat. As they finished making it, they asked me to pay. It was at that moment I realized I was one broke dude. My card was denied and I had a whole 30 cents on me. I explained I had no way to pay them and started apologizing. This nice older lady, who appeared to be the owner, gave me a look of understanding and handed me the cone. She told me to just take it, not to worry about it. She didn't know, but I was going through some hard times. I was fighting with my girlfriend, I'd just lost my job, and I wasn't sure where my next month's rent was coming from. When I saw the Dairy Queen, I thought that I'd surely got $3 in my account. Turns out, not even that much. The cone meant so much to me. I came back a few months later when things in my life had stabilized, and I bought a Blizzard. I told the cashier to also charge me for a medium twist cone with a crunch coat, but to not make it. I was going to thank the lady and explain what that little gesture meant to me, but at the time, she wasn't there. A bit off topic, but I used to work at Valvoline, and one of the services we did were tire rotations. For those of you that are unaware, a tire rotation takes absolutely no product. It's just a service where back wheels are moved to the front and front wheels are moved to the back. There were multiple occasions when we did rotations and the person didn't end up having the money for it, usually having forgotten their card, and we had to undo the rotation, which essentially meant doing another tire rotation. 2 girls and I, all in our late teens, had a meal together in a family restaurant. When the bill came, we only had half the amount between the 3 of us. I suggested leaving my watch and returning within the hour. They agreed, and I did just as promised. In my experience, they leave their ID at the restaurant and go get the money, or the police get a call. Yep, my wife and I went to a restaurant, she left her purse at home, I forgot I'd taken my debit card out of my wallet because it cracked in half and I was waiting on a replacement. After I became thoroughly embarrassed, they copied down my driver's license info, and I told them I'd run by a bank in the morning and bring them the cash, which I did. They were actually really understanding about it. To make a long story short, we continued to go to that particular restaurant usually about once a week when we were in town. We occasionally got car-side service, and one time they screwed up my entree. I called them to tell them about it, and the manager ended up mailing me a gift certificate to comp my entire order plus $20. Fast forward and I've become pretty successful. I've hosted my last 2 Christmas parties at that restaurant. I take vendors, managers, and employees there. This restaurant has made its business back 100-fold because years ago they were professional about me forgetting a debit card, and a year after that they made more than right on a messed up order. I'm pretty sure there's enough adult material out there to explain exactly what happens in this situation. Now look here, as far as the narrator is concerned, it would have to be the meal of a lifetime to be worth me debasing myself for that. We're talking at least $18. Maybe throw in a dessert and you have a deal. Had this happened to me the first time I went to a little place that I didn't know was cash only. It was only 15 to 20 minutes before close, so I couldn't come back after hitting an ATM. The owner lady pulled out a little card box and wrote my name, phone number, and amount owned on a card, and filed it in there, as apparently it happens often, and they allow regulars to run tabs. I paid it the next time I went in. I used to be a waiter. If they're willing to leave collateral, then I'd usually let them go and get their money. In the odd event of people just refusing to pay the bill, I called the police and then rang around every bar and restaurant in our small town and had them blacklisted. My brother had to leave his wife there and go get his wallet. I asked him why he went back. She slapped me. An older lady came into a restaurant once when I was a cashier. She said she only had enough cash for the bus fare, but was hungry and had to wait another 45 minutes to catch the bus. I gave her a tray with a small baguette and an apple. Normally, each would retail for $1 something, but they were free for employees because overhead was probably about 10 cents, so I didn't mind giving them just to her. They just ask for the patron to give the food back. Duh. Just trying to get my muffin back. Not like that, you're not. You have to slug her under the diaphragm. I own a restaurant. I've had 2 regular customers who, for whatever reason, were unable to pay. They just paid me back the next time they were in, and I've been burned by 2 strangers, both women. One, I'm sure she actually did mean to come by with the money but either forgot or got lazy. The other one, I think I got played. She was good-looking, well-dressed, and flirty, and I'm a sucker. Getting burned hasn't changed my policy. I trust in the goodness of people, especially since they know they're actually affecting a single person, me, rather than a faceless corporation. I saw an episode of Cops where this couple of rednecks, wanted to take a doggy bag from a buffet restaurant. There was a sign saying you couldn't take anything out from the buffet, and it had escalated to the point where they were refusing to pay unless they were allowed to leave with their leftovers. All the restaurant patrons were waiting to see the outcome when the cameras and cops arrived. The police told the couple they had to pay, the sign said no leftovers to be taken out, and if they tried to leave without paying or refused to pay, they'd be charged with Dine and Dash. The restaurant patrons all applauded. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My parents have owned a well-known diner in town since I was about 3 years old, and I'd say about 97% of our customers are regular as the sunrise. I'm not there all the time, but my mum comes home with stories sometimes about people who don't or can't pay. There are a pile of bills, literally years old, that my parents have held on to from customers that haven't paid yet. By owning a local business, my parents have connections and knowledge of nearly everyone in town and beyond. and they know who stiffs and who doesn't. It's interesting to see who does and doesn't know, because even the people who have absolutely nothing under control in their lives will still manage to at least pay the whole of their meal, if not provide a super great tip, and will make sure that they can before they choose what to order. If a card declines, in my experience at least, they leave and find cash and return within a pretty decent amount of time. Surprisingly, the same thing with a super regular customer who pays with the card but doesn't feel like they have enough cash to leave a tip. We only accept cash tips. They'll leave for the bank and come back with cash. For customers who aren't regulars and who my parents don't know will come back, I believe they take some kind of ID or collateral. I don't recall any police getting involved. The Chipotle near my college. I paid and was walking out the door when the employee who was working the register ran after me and told me my card had been declined. Thinking it was a mistake, I went back to the register and tried again. After 3 or 4 tries, I was digging around desperately in my wallet for money or another card, neither of which I had, and the manager came up and said, "It's okay, let her go." I was mortified and I just so much appreciated them letting me get out of the humiliating situation. Yeah, seems like most places, if they're making money, they'll just take the hit, knowing the person will spread the good word around about them. We politely ask the patrons to follow us into the back, and they just generally assume they'll be washing dishes or waiting for the police to arrive. This is just a simple ruse, of course, to get them behind the padded, soundproof kitchen doors, at which point we club them over the back of the head and drag them into the freezer room. Since we stopped purchasing meat from local ranchers, our profits have gone way up. Ah, you have the same policy as my old restaurant, I see. Good to know. Do you also use the livers of the more amply sized customers? We got endless compliments on our foie gras. I'm kidding, of course. Or am I? Yes. Or am I? I took my girlfriend out for a special occasion to a very expensive tasting menu at a restaurant a few years ago. The bill came to $600 and my card was declined because I'd maxed it out earlier in the day. I left her at the restaurant as collateral and ran home to get another card. They were completely fine about it, surprisingly. I left a nice tip as thanks. This will get buried, but it's just another reason to like In-N-Out. I went through the drive-thru one night and forgot my wallet. The cashier told me to take the food, go home, enjoy it, and then come back to pay. I did exactly that. I forgot my wallet while going through a McDonald's drive-thru once. The manager told me I could pay the next time I came through and gave me my food. I immediately drove home, retrieved my wallet, and returned to pay. The manager thanked me but went even farther and insisted that I take a new order since my food was probably cold. While my brother was working at McDonald's, some guy drove up demanding apple pies and saying he wasn't going to pay for them. My brother was just like, no. In hindsight, that guy probably shouldn't have informed him that he wasn't going to pay prior to being handed the goods. I work at a pottery studio where a lot of kids come in after school. A few times they don't realize that the prices don't include tax, so when they go up to pay, they come up a little short. If it's just a few bucks, I tell them not to worry so they don't get upset. Every time I have to let it slide, a parent comes in within a few days, or when they pick up the pottery with the money they owed and something a little extra. I went for a late-night grub grabbing at a fast food place called Tommy's Burgers, and for some odd reason my card wouldn't work. I offered to return the food and came back when I'd gone to an ATM for some cash. They just said to come back with the money and keep the food. They were probably just expecting me to not return with the money, but I did return and paid the amount owed. I've never dined and dashed in the traditional sense per se, but I've been at a bar I regularly go to, had a drink or two, left to do something, and then come back a few hours later and kept drinking on the same tab. One of the perks, I guess, about going to the same place a lot. Also, when I did work in restaurants, we were allowed to follow them outside and try to find them, and confront them. That's when I worked in the mall. If that didn't work, we'd call the cops. If someone underpays at mine, I make them pay me back by drinking and doing hard substances with me. Their treat. If someone does this, don't they get arrested for theft? I think it's called something else, but not outright theft. Something along the lines of defrauding an innkeeper or some old-school term like that. Once I saw that a customer was unable to pay for her item, as she had shorted several dollars. I was behind her in line and I saw that she was looking around at the line and then asked, "Does anyone have $3.50? Then I realized this woman ordering her baguette sandwich was actually the tall, aquatic, goddamn Loch Ness monster from the Neolithic era. I'm shocked to hear how many people call the police. I work in a restaurant, and if someone's card was declined and they couldn't pay, the meal was on us. Seems like a simple human decency thing to me. I guess it would be another thing if it seemed like they were trying to defraud us, but for the one lady who came in and was terribly embarrassed, the last thing I could do was embarrass her even further. On a related note, I was once going through some tough times and went to a number of restaurants in Ottawa offering to work for a meal. Not a single place let me earn my meal, nor did they give me any food. I just stayed hungry until I could get some help at the food bank. It turned me from a willing worker with some bad luck to a beggar. Since then, I've given hundreds to food banks. I had this happen when I was at the gas station and I had $30 in gas racked up and I left my wallet at home. They took my cell phone as I drove home real quick to get the money. A bit off topic, but during Christmas time a few years ago, there was this guy with his son on a very cold, snowy night at the pharmacy during my shift. He couldn't afford his meds and he, obviously, just recently had surgery. He was going through his wallet trying to muster up some cash to pay for it. His cards declined. Everyone in line was getting all angry with him. The guy seemed broke and to be having a tough time. He genuinely seemed like an alright dude. I walked around, slid my card, and paid for it. He was ever so thankful and tried giving me his few dollars that he did have. I declined, wished him and his son a Merry Christmas, and left. He was tearing up. A few months later, at a different location, the guy found me, thanked me again, gave me a hug, and gave me a whole bunch of coupons for free meals and tacos at Taco John's. He was a shift manager. Later, I came to find out I could have been terminated for that act of kindness. Believe it or not, in Arizona you aren't legally obligated to pay for your food in a sit-down restaurant. Alcohol is a different story. That you can be arrested for. Obviously, if you choose not to pay for your food, they don't ever have to allow you back in. Fortunately, in my time in Arizona as a bartender/waiter, I've never had to deal with this. I'm planning 2 weeks in Arizona. Tell me, are there at least 14 decent restaurants there? Well, that's really funny. Please don't do this, viewers. I somehow never had to deal with someone being too hard up to pay in 6 years of hospitality. Go figure. When I was about 12, my friend Sarah and I were dropped off by her dad at his town's local swimming pool, and told he'd be back that evening. He gave us about $12 for food, which we decided to take to Hardee's within walking distance of the pool. I remember the guy behind the register being kind of arrogant through the whole transaction, but that intensified when we came up like 40 cents short on our order. I remember him making a big deal out of it and being like, I could get into a lot of trouble for this, but I guess it's fine. I guess I can just get it this time. I've only had this happen to me once. Last year I went on a trip to France, and all of my money for the trip was on a visa. Me and my tour group got to the hotel, and there were lots of restaurants nearby. I happened to be the only person who just wanted some good old McD's, so I went in and ordered. They prepared my order, and I got my visa ready to pay. Then they needed my PIN. I hadn't known they'd need it, as it was my first time out of the States, and it was a Sunday, so no banks were open. The only person who worked there spoke a little English, and talked to me and then to her boss. They were extremely understanding and gave me my meal for free. After that, I'll never hear of anyone saying the French aren't kind. Unless they can present sufficient collateral, I know them as regulars, or someone comes with a cash and a card, the cops get called. I'm a restaurant manager. If it escalates, we call the cops. If someone stays behind for a moment while you get your money situated, no big deal. Other than that, don't eat what you can't pay for. It's a business. Back when I was a manager at a certain specialty beverage store, I'd just tell them that I'd cover the $1 to $3 shortage if they came back the next day and brought the larger size drink. It worked pretty well. When did one crazy chance stop you from ruining your life? Had a friend who asked if I wanted to move to California with him and his family. I was 16 and thought it sounded fun. I didn't know at the time, but he was actually rescuing me from my insane mother and a not-so-happy home life. When you have stuff like this going on, sometimes it's hard to know that it's happening until you become an adult and gain a perspective. I shudder to think what would have happened to me if I'd stayed there. In 1996, my parents were deciding between two houses to move into. They picked the new construction that resulted in being placed on shoddy soil and years of lawsuits when we ultimately moved in 2001. Anyway, the other house they could have picked, presumably on better soil, would have placed my older sister at a well-known high school beginning with C in the exact same year as an infamous massacre that took place there. 2 consecutive seizures from alcohol withdrawal the day I checked into rehab without detoxing. I was told afterwards that it was 50-50 that I survived that night. I'm currently just a couple of months shy of 5 years sober. I broke my lease and moved out of a terrible apartment complex I was living in to move back home because I was broke. 2 weeks later, the whole complex burned to the ground from a crystal lab in another unit. A few clarifications. The apartment was right outside of downtown Birmingham, Alabama. I didn't have renter's insurance, I was a broke 20-year-old at the time, so I wouldn't have got any kickback from it. I did end up getting my security deposit back, which they said I had forfeit by breaking the lease, so that was nice. And you sillies, that crystal lab wasn't mine. I picked mine up and brought mine to Florida with me where it belonged. Good. Can't have Alabama taking credit for Florida Crystal. I also choose to believe that the man who wrote this was just fleeing further away from Walter White and his competition. When I was a teen, I was very sick. I was like 90 pounds and couldn't hold down food. I knew something was wrong with me, but doctors were falsely under the impression that I had an eating disorder, and thought I was lying and that my parents were enabling me. At one hospital visit when I was 17 years old, I was lied to by a doctor and tricked into joining an eating disorder program against my will. They kept telling me that they were going to keep me in the hospital for 3 to 6 months, and they had this whole program planned out for me, and they put me on an insanely high dosage of anxiety meds that turned me into a zombie person. They weren't telling my parents much info, and my mum actually caught them having secret conversations about me that they didn't want her to hear. We were starting to get vibes that they might forcibly take me away from my parents. So I made up an excuse to leave the hospital and said I'd be back in a couple of days, but never did go back. I waited a very hard year alone with no treatment until I turned 18, when I was legally an adult and couldn't be kidnapped, and then I felt safe enough to try to give medical treatment another go. I finally found out that I had lupus the whole time. It freaks me out to think what would have happened to me if I'd been forced into eating disorder treatments for years for no reason and getting zero treatment for the pretty dangerous disease they were so sure I didn't have. Everyone had good intentions and doctors save so many lives. They're often really, really, really good people, but I hate that people like me slip through the cracks and almost die sometimes. For those wondering, I didn't take any legal action. It honestly didn't occur to me because I'd been going to too many different doctors for 5 years at that point, and I always had the same experience, like not being believed, them trying to force treatment for an eating disorder or mental illness, and that last hospital visit was just the terrible climax to my story. I didn't know any different because to me that was just how the medical system was. In retrospect, I wish I'd done something, though. I hope the system improves and this stops happening. Much love to those with similar hard stories, and also nurses and doctors who are compassionate. I was supposed to hang out with a couple of friends one night. We were going to go to a party that we were all invited to the weekend before. I asked to get off work early so I could go to the party. My manager let me go, so I went to find my friends. But I had a really, really bad feeling all day, and it just kept getting worse. Instead of turning left to go to my friend's house, I turned right and went home. I found out a few weeks later that they got busted with white snow in their car. They were 16 and 17 at the time, I was 18, so I would have been screwed. The biggest of life's bullets that I dodged was a 9mm. Christmas 2008. Me and my little bro were opening gifts in the living room and a bullet came through our crappy roof, landing a few centimeters away from where we were. Once at a bar, a woman was surprisingly into me as we danced. If I'd had more confidence back then, I definitely could have taken her home. In the end, one of my karaoke buddies ended up with her instead and got caught by her husband that night. I know a guy that got stabbed by the husband after he went home with a woman. Apparently she just liked seeing the husband go crazy on the dudes she brought home. I was on the train in Brooklyn a few years ago. Next to me was this man who had a big house tool in his book bag. I think it was a hammer. I was shoulder to freaking shoulder next to this guy and I knew something was up. He was moving very oddly. It was just the vibe that this man is up to something. I decided that once we got to the next stop, I'd get off the train and catch the next one, which I did. 30 minutes later, this guy gets off the train at my stop and starts attacking people. He went after cops and was shot. If I didn't get off that train and instead got off with him, I might be dead. In 1996, the IRA bombed the Arndale Centre in Manchester. Myself and a group of friends were on a bus heading straight there. We were probably about 10 to 20 minutes out. The thing is, one of my friends was late. So we had to get on the bus just after the one we intended to get on. Guess where that bus was when the aforementioned bomb went off? I almost fell for a pyramid scheme in high school. My friend brought me to one of their meetings, ACN, and I was so on board, but my parents talked me down. I was upset at them until I learned more about multi-level marketing schemes and quickly changed my mind. Sometimes I imagine where I'd be now if I went through with it. It wouldn't be pretty, that's for sure. High school girlfriend wanted to talk about baby names. I was headed to college. No thoughts of being a parent. My mum even found a note in my pocket listing her favorites if we had a boy. Anyway, we broke up after 2 years. The next guy she dated was a dad within 9.5 months. Yeah, it sounds like you definitely dodged a couple of bullets there. The first being a family you weren't necessarily interested in having, and the second one being the one you were held up with when you were working in the gas station for the rest of your life, trying to support said family. Not me, but my dad. He travelled to London for work back from 2001 to 2007. He was booked for the day off on July 7th, 2005, as that's my birthday. And the train he normally got to work was one of the ones that was attacked. Met a guy years ago, thought we were friends, got into contact with him a few years ago, and he was acting sketchy, so I unfriended him. I looked him up and found out he was on an offenders registry. I was at the Tacoma Mall when the Tacoma Mall shooting happened. Walking right towards where the guy opened fire when my then fiancé decided to go back into a store we were just in. No crap, the time it took us to get back to the store was the same amount of time it would have taken to be right where it all broke out. 10 seconds one direction or 10 seconds the other, hearing the screams and shots echoing in the mall was crazy. They locked us in the Suncoast video store for a while before having us exit out the back. To add some more detail, since people are asking, I'd run into a person I worked with at the time about 10 minutes before the shooting. I think he went back to Macy's and we went to the Suncoast. We were Christmas shopping, the mall was pretty busy. It came down to my fiancée remembering she just wanted to get someone a series of Friends DVDs. So we headed back. Just as we were a few feet from the store, the first cluster of shots rang off, and there was this shared confusion as to what the frick was happening. My first thought was gang violence or something. It was Tacoma after all, because it sounded like several people blasting off at once. There were echoes. If something like this happened today, I'd probably more correctly guess what it was, but then it wasn't so much of a thing as it is now. We had to yell at several women who were still looking around right outside the store, confused. We told them to shelter inside, waving at them. My memory might be off, but it felt like maybe 20 or 30 of us crammed into the Suncoast, them having put the metal gate down and locking it. So we were all in there just listening to the shots and screaming, wondering what was happening. As time went on and it continued, it seemed less likely to be some gang thing, as they'd get the frick out. So I and others started saying we needed to exit the store. He could have shot through the metal gate, and we'd be fish in a barrel. I was spared from seeing anyone who was shot. The co-worker I'd just seen prior was not so lucky, as he was around several who had been hit. It understandably really affected him. He was this tough truck driver dude who doesn't take crap from anyone, and when I saw him and we talked about it, he started crying. Crazy how much pain one person is capable of inflicting. I think about this day a lot. Being spiritual and not religious, I feel like God spared us that day. I'm sorry to hear about others who were adversely affected by it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not me, but my dad. COVID saved his life. He was having trouble breathing and general signs of heart trouble. Middle of the night, woken up to a panic, my mum's first instinct was to drive him to the hospital about 20 minutes away. On their way out of the driveway, my mum realized that the ER was going to be full of people with COVID and didn't know where to take him. She went back into the driveway and called for an ambulance. About 5 minutes later, thank goodness they were close, the paramedics showed up right as my dad collapsed. They were able to revive him and sustain him until they could get him to where he needed to go. If my mum had stuck to her plan of driving 20 minutes to the hospital, he would have died in the car on the freeway. I know COVID has screwed a lot of things up for a lot of people, but for me it's been a blessing in disguise.
Say hello to your 13-year-old son.
I have never had a DNA test done so fast in my life. I went on a date with someone, a friend of a friend who'd only been in town about a month. I was fresh out of a painful relationship and honestly keen enough to ignore a couple of warning signs. The date rolled around, we were to meet in a pub. I'll spare you the long version of this. She arrived 3 hours late after giving the constant, "I'm just around the corner" updates. Despite this, we got on amazingly and had a lovely evening, which should have been an afternoon, but We stepped outside to make out and smoke, and she developed a case of being drunkenly sad and started talking about being a victim of the unspeakable act by her ex, in detail. And then at the end, she blew my mind by saying, "God, feel how wet I am down there, all that talking about the unspeakable act," and then stuffed my hand up her skirt and into her undies. I was stunned, pulled back, and kept a little distance for the rest of the night. There was no second date. She rejected me because apparently I wasn't over my ex, whom we'd never discussed. My gut reaction to this was that I was dodging a bullet there. This reaction was proved right when she later moved 200 miles to be with a guy she had met at a Renaissance fair earlier that month, and then got into a stabbing match with him. It's unclear from the grapevine if the stabbing was performed using replica swords, but I'd like to think it was. I mean, one can only hope. You haven't really clarified the extent of the harm that was done, or if said stabbing was done at the fair after she had moved there. So many questions, but regardless, I would have been freaked out on that date too. Ooh. When I was about 10 years old, I leaned backwards into a tall bookcase shelf, which happened to have a sword collection on the highest shelf. Many of these swords had their blades exposed for show. And what would happen at that very moment? Said shelf gave way and all of the swords came and landed on me, including my head. Surprisingly, I didn't get a single cut, no concussion, and only a small bruise on the noggin. And being young, I dismissed this incident with gracious forgetfulness. The bookcase of Damocles. I once met a girl at a bar a few years ago. She was hot and she started a conversation with me. I don't really remember about what, but at the end of it, I wanted to ask her out. But being extremely shy, I couldn't. If she hadn't started to talk to me, I would have just admired and avoided her, being a big and awkward guy. Anyway, I went to the bathroom to clear my head, and when I came back, I saw my friend, who I came there with, asking her out. Which was a total jerk move because I told him I wanted to do that. And I just stood there with an awkward smile waiting for them to leave so I could drink my anger away. A couple of days after that, a mutual friend said that friend from the bar was robbed by a girl he had brought to his apartment. So still today I get mixed feelings when I see him. Friends and I went to the top of Bunker Hill in Boston. It's 294 steps and they are straight up. At the top, I took a picture of them and backed up a little to get them and the view. After the picture, I turned around and realized there was no rail and I'd almost stepped directly into the hatch leading down the stairs. My friend was giving me a ride to the bus station. We get pulled over by the cops, and I have several ounces of green herb in my backpack. My friend has about $20 worth of green herb in his undies, which I'd given him as payment for the ride. The cops give some pretty crappy excuses like failing to signal within 50 feet of an intersection, which was obviously a pretext. Cops ask us for permission to search the car, and my scared friend gives consent like an idiot. Cops tell us to exit the car. I grab my backpack and we both get out of it. One cop begins searching the car while the other two prepare to start searching us. My mind was racing. What could I do to get out of this? This could put me inside for a long time. Out of desperation, I asked the guy about to search me, a sergeant, if I was free to go since I was only a passenger. It was the only thing I could think of to ask. To my surprise, the sergeant hands me back my ID and says I'm free to go. I later realized that at that point they hadn't found anything illegal yet, and they didn't really have reasonable suspicion to detain either of us. I was dumbfounded. That gambit shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. I put on my backpack and I strolled calmly to the nearest intersection round the corner, and as soon as I'm out of view, sprinted about 3 blocks to a construction site and hid inside a porta-john, where I stayed for the next 2.5 hours. My friend calls me about an hour after the stop while I was still hiding in there and says the cops found his green herb right after they let me go and gave him a $500 ticket. He says that they suspect I'm the one who provided it to him and that they're driving around at this very moment looking to pick me back up. I waited until well after dark to emerge from my hiding place and caught a taxi home. I laid low for a few weeks expecting a knock at my door any day, but fortunately I've never heard anything about it again. My ex. He got engaged right after me and proceeded to cheat on her the entire time until she broke up with him. In 1994, I was on a business trip to LA. I stopped for a pack of cigarettes before getting on the Santa Monica freeway. The North Ridge earthquake happened while I was in line and parts of the freeway collapsed. I quit smoking after that pack. I overslept for work a few years back and arrived about 20 minutes late. When I got there, a car had barreled through the fence at the edge of our parking area and was headfirst into the rear of my co-worker's car. It was a hit and run while the car was reported as stolen, so there was no driver to get insurance information from, and my co-worker's insurance ended up being billed for his own repairs. My normal parking spot was the spot between the fence and my co-worker's car. If I'd been on time, it would have been my car that got hit, and the car would have collided with the side of my car, causing damage to at least 3 panels of the vehicle and likely breaking all that side's windows. It was the happiest I've ever been to be late. I'm unclear on whether the bullet here is that you were uninsured, if the car hit the exact time you would have been stepping out of it, or if you didn't like the other guy whose car did get hit, or all three. In any case, I can't begrudge you being thankful that it happened to someone else. I moved a dresser into the basement at my mum's house before I moved out. I lost my grip and fell down almost an entire flight of stairs against a solid cinder block wall, the dresser coming right behind me. Somehow, I managed to walk away unharmed. It was unlikely to kill me, but I'm still surprised I walked away without being hurt or breaking something. I was one split decision away from dying at 12. When I was 12 years old, I was going to be home alone for one evening since my mother was going to a dinner party at her friend's house. She wouldn't be home super late, midnight at the latest, but I'd have to tuck myself in and such. I was looking forward to it and feeling like a really big girl. Hell yeah! Since we lived in a kind of shared 2-story townhouse with close neighbors on each side and a nice lady living in a separate apartment upstairs. I felt super safe being home alone at night. An hour before dinner, a good friend called and asked me if I wanted to come to her house and have dinner. Afterwards, they were going to watch The Abyss in their giant home theater. Being a lover of sci-fi and having heard about the really cool computer graphics in that movie, I'd been wanting to watch it forever. Having the chance to watch it on such a cool setup convinced me to go, despite having looked forward to being home alone. The evening went fine and I had a good time, but since the movie was really long, I got home pretty late. When I pulled up to my house on my bike, I only just noticed an orange glare in the windows upstairs before the first-story window exploded out into the garden. The fire department arrived only a few minutes later and put out the fire before it could engulf our part of the house as well. Apparently, the lady upstairs had fallen asleep on her couch with a cigarette in her hand. The fire had smoldered on the couch, developed a very toxic smoke, which not only caused the lady to get normal smoke inhalation, the chemicals also messed up her brain permanently. She was in a coma for a year or so before they ended up pulling the plug. The doozy was that we shared our ventilation system with the upstairs apartment, so our apartment was jet black. So much of the poisonous smoke had come into our home. The fire marshal said that with that amount of smoke, combined with my small stature, I would never have even noticed the fire as I would have been asleep by then, but simply have slipped into a coma and died before anyone had even noticed the fire from outside the house. I think the shock almost killed my mother as well. See, she thought I was home, I hadn't told her of my sudden change of plans, and got the call about the fire from a neighbor, to only later learn that I was shocked but safe and sound, being looked after by another neighbor. So I guess that's the story of how my budding love of sci-fi and computer graphics helped me to dodge a bullet with the big fat death stamped on it. I still love that movie. In short, being a sci-fi loving, computer-interested, spontaneous preteen girl caused me to avoid dying in a house fire. When did you see an absolute jerk get wrecked by karma? I'm a mechanic and I used to work at a non-dealer garage. While I was in my 3rd year of my apprenticeship, I wasn't earning much, but I was on around £120 a week. Minimum wage was about £200 at the time in the UK. I could just about afford my own car. It was nothing special, it was a Toyota Corolla 2.0 diesel that literally sounded like a transit van when I put my foot down, and the big ends sounded like they were trying to slowly eat their way through the block. I was just on my way back to work after my lunch break, and as I was waiting at some traffic lights, some kids around my age, 17 through 19, pulled up alongside in a Honda Civic shouting stuff such as, "Get a real car!" because I'd overtaken them on a dual carriageway. The light turned green and the driver accelerated and pulled away like a bat out of heck. Less than half a mile down the road, I saw a big cloud of blue smoke. It was them. They'd blown the engine. I got back to work and told one of my co-workers what had happened, and we both had a laugh about it, as you do. Fast forward an hour or so, and a recovery truck pulls in. It was the same Honda Civic that was at the traffic lights. My co-worker was booking the car in. He asked the driver what car it was, to which the driver responded, "A Honda Civic." "Oh, you should get a real car," was my co-worker's reply. I was at the mall with my best friend, and we were walking to my car when a random driver in a passing car yelled out a homophobic slur. As we turned in shock, we saw the driver and his car go up the median and smash his front end into the stop sign. While I was an undergrad, I was driving from my parents' house and pulled up to a stop sign. Two middle high school white boys on bikes crossed in front of me and started yelling stuff and throwing gang signs at me. One of them proceeds to flip over the front of his bike and face plants into the sidewalk. I slow down, roll down my windows, and laugh as loud as I can at them as I drive away. On a way to a party with some friends, another car full of kids flew up behind us, leaning out of the windows, yelling things at us, and then they crossed the double yellow lane on a two-lane road to pass us. When we came around the next bend, they'd crashed into our house and were all getting out and running away. I did not realize that today's video would have such an automotive theme. Turns out, if you're leaning out your window or hanging off your bike screaming obscenities at strangers, you have an increased chance of eating number 2. So maybe don't do it, folks. I was crossing a one-way street in the crosswalk at an intersection with a stoplight. A guy in an SUV came flying up to the red light and made a left turn without stopping to go the wrong way down the street I'm crossing. He nearly hit me and another pedestrian in the crosswalk. We both turned to angrily yell something at him, but a cop happened to be at the light and pulled him over before we got a word out. The guy must have gotten a ticket for wrong way in a one-way street, failing to stop at the light, and hopefully reckless driving for almost hitting two pedestrians in a crosswalk. During a huge snowstorm a couple of years ago, my friend and I lived right by a small hill. A lot of cars couldn't go up the hill, so my friend and I were helping people move to the curb of the street. Now, we lived by a highway exit and it was rush hour, so there was a lot of backup. Suddenly, this D-bag in a huge Chevy Avalanche pulls by us and yells, "You freaks are backing up the highway for miles." He tried to speed off, but ended up getting stuck and unable to go up the hill. We looked and laughed. We ended up helping him to move to the shoulder as he has this look of embarrassment on his face the whole time. I've got the perfect story for this. When I was at a Major League Baseball game one time, there was a vendor with a horrendous speech impediment. It was so bad that I could barely understand him when he screamed out, "Cold beer!" or "cold beer." I heard a kid about 2 rows behind me begin to giggle and mock the vendor. I'm not sure if the vendor heard this going on, but it was definitely an earshot of him. I ignored the brat's jokes and went back to watching the game. The next batter popped the baseball straight up in the air. When it came down, it nailed this kid right in the knee. That was probably one of the most satisfying moments I've had in my life so far. Later in the game, a batter let go of their bat by accident and it flew into the stands. It ended up hitting some dude right in the chest. I can't even imagine what he did to deserve that one. My cousin is a D1 NCAA runner at Loyola, and he was out running one day when some D-bag drove up next to him and threw his full hot coffee out of his window at him. My cousin caught the cup without any spillage and returned to sender before running down a wooded trail. I'll try to make this story as uncomplicated as possible. I work at a restaurant and we often use Groupon to promote. As part of the Groupon rules, only one Groupon may be used per table. People constantly try to break this rule and often try any tactic to try to get us to accept multiple Groupons at once. So this one time, a group of 5 comes in with 3 Groupons. They asked the hostess if they could use them. She said no. They asked me, and I said the same thing. So they order the cheapest bottle of wine at the table. I go to get it, but unfortunately we didn't have it. I went back, let them know, and one of the customers went, "Well, since you didn't have the bottle we wanted, you should let us use our Groupons." I think it's a joke and I give a mild laugh. The guy puts his offended face on and goes, "Oh no, I'm serious. Please bring your manager." My manager comes, listens to the gentleman, and then tells him he can't accept his Groupon, but he can give him a discount on a pitcher of sangria, which is the next cheapest option for a big table, and a 10% discount on their whole check. I bring the sangria, and they don't like it. They send it back. They decide to order another bottle of wine. Again, it's the next cheapest option on the drinks menu. I get the bottle to the table, I open the bottle, and they taste it. The guy at the head of the table goes, I don't know. Do you guys have this by the glass?" Yes, sir, we do. I think we'll do that. Just bring us 3 glasses and we'll share it." Throughout the rest of the meal, they were increasingly demanding, rude, and just obnoxiously needy. No request came with a please or thank you. I'm a professional and I just tough it out, smile it out, and I do my best to get them out as quickly as possible. So when it's time to pay, I bring the check with the 10% already taken off. They ask me about the Groupon, and I respond with, "No problem. Do you have it on paper or on your phone?" "It's in the phone." As soon as I put it down on the table to redeem it and write all the tables, poof, the phone runs out of battery. As they scramble, curse, and realize they won't be able to use any of their Groupons, not a single care in this world could take the look of a satisfied working girl off my face. This lady I saw was in such a hurry to leave the parking lot, she decided to forego the queue and instead hazard the hilly median. Her car got stuck. Everyone was pointing and laughing. Having her car towed, needless to say, took longer than if she had just bloody waited, and she was pictured in the newspaper to boot. I had a woman tailgating me, even though I was going about 5 miles over the speed limit. It was a curvy road with no passing lane. We finally got to a spot with a passing lane and she blew by me, laying on the horn, easily going 20 miles over the speed limit. About 10 miles down the road, she got pulled over by a state trooper. Where she got pulled over, the speed limit went from 55 to 35. I saw the trooper at the gas station later and thanked him. He said she was so rude he wrote the ticket for 40 over, which is a much bigger fine. Most officers here cut you a break and only write it for 5 over, which cuts the fine in half usually. This one guy pulled up beside my mother and flipped her off, calling her a B-word. The light turned green and he accelerated like a bat out of heck, only to get absolutely T-boned. My friend threw his straw wrapper on the ground. 2 seconds later, he dropped his whole soda and spilled it all over the grass. Environmental karma right there. Sadly, I don't think that this would have encouraged your friend to pick up the rubbish from the straw and the rest of his drink. Oh well, at least he got screwed. Okay, I used to be a crystal addict, but I've been clean for about 7 years. Anyway, I'd picked up a guy I kind of knew. He was a crystal cook. We'll say his name was Chris, because it is, but he went by Fruit Bat. We went back to my house and chilled for a bit, did some substances, and probably took some stuff apart or cleaned something. Well, we got this bright idea to go tweak out at Walmart at 5 in the morning. As we're leaving, I see that he'd left his CD case on my couch. I didn't really know him that well and he had some good music in there, so I could have easily said nothing and gained some new music. However, me being the crystal addict with a heart of gold, I told him he was about to leave his CDs. This is important later. He stuffs it in his backpack and we take off. About a half mile down the road, we got pulled over for his idiot butt not wearing a seatbelt. The cop comes up and asks for my license and registration and asks me a few questions. He then asks me to step out of the car and asks me what's up with my friend. I asked him what he meant and he told me the guy was acting very nervous. He asks if he can search the vehicle and I say, yes. Why, oh why did I do that? I guess in my head at the time we'd just polished off the last of the substances that we had. Part of the way through searching my car, he comes back and asks me if there's anything in Fruit Bat's backpack before he opens it. I told him I didn't know because it wasn't mine. It belonged to the other guy. The officer then tells me that Fruit Bat says it wasn't his. It was in my vehicle and therefore in my possession. He puts it on his hood and starts basically pulling out part of a crystal lab from the backpack. He puts me, and only me, in handcuffs and continues searching through the bag. He then pulls a CD case out of one of the front pockets, looks at it for a moment and says, "What was your name again?" I tell him my name. He sets the CD case on the hood, walks off to talk to the other guy. I look down at the case, and on the front it says, Chris's Book of Bangs. He cuffs the guy and puts him in his car, uncuffs me while lecturing me on associating with undesirables, and lets me go. Throughout the entire ordeal, Fruitbat would not make eye contact with me. He went to prison for intent to manufacture crystal. In short, not stealing some guy's CDs kept me from going to prison for intent to manufacture crystal. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We had a fire drill at school, and being rather a large school, we took up the entire street outside. Most cars passing by understood that it would be a few moments, but not this one lady. She got so angry at waiting, she screamed at all of us, backed up her car the entire block going about 40 miles an hour, and hit a pole. One of her mirrors fell off. We all laughed. Another high school story. We were hanging out at the local pizza place after a football game, and some kids from another school showed up and started making trouble. I'm a little hazy on the specifics, but somehow they shattered the glass front door of the restaurant and then fled. The cops were called, and as they were questioning people about the incident, those kids for some reason doubled back, lost control of their car, drove off the road and got the car stuck on top of a small boulder in front of the strip mall. The cops very casually strolled over and cuffed them. Mine happened just last night. A guy at my poker table refused to take his friend back to Atlanta, which was about 2 hours away, where the guy's wife and child were being hospitalized after a car wreck. He said he'd just paid for a beer that hadn't come yet, and the game was really good. His friend was freaking out, understandably. The next hand, I flopped the best possible hand, straight to the queen, and he flopped the second best possible hand. I took all of his money, about $320. The table was trying to hold back their laughter. I tossed the guy $5 for the beer and told him to drive safe. My neighbor many years ago was taunting me and my friends during my birthday party, like he was being a severe jerk, calling us names, yelling at my mum, and then my mum called my dad, and my dad came over and ripped him a new butt. The kid called the cops for, quote, verbal assault from my dad, but it turns out the cops just got the kid in trouble because they found beer in his car. I almost cried at mine, it was so awesome. I was driving one day down a 2-lane road trying to get back to home after work. It was 5 o'clock traffic and it was bad. I mean like once a month, really crappy traffic. It was a 4-lane, 40-mile-per-hour road with a raised median in the middle. There were cars backed up for about 2 miles going at 3 miles per hour towards the traffic-liberating intersection. It took me about 40 minutes to get to the end, and I was in the right-hand lane. Suddenly, I see out of my left-hand mirror an absolute idiot in his D-bag truck that's jumped out onto the median, he was really far back, and starting to barrel down the grass median at about 20 miles per hour. He's skipped tons of people, and finally when the light turned green and people started moving, he jumped back down off the median and was nearly hit by 2 people. By this time, he was parallel with me, so I caught a good glimpse of him. Just a regular old stereotypical D-bag. The light turned red and everyone stops. Suddenly, a guy pulls up next to him and starts honking to get his attention. The D-bag ignores him and turns his radio up. The guy in the other car keeps honking to get his attention, but no luck. Finally, the guy gets out of his car and the D-bag rolls down his window and says, "What the frick do you want, dude?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure you either cracked your engine block or ripped off your oil filter when you jumped that curb." The D-bag just shrugs and says, "So what?" So I look down and I see a ton of oil spilling out the front end of his truck. The light turns green and he starts weaving in and out of traffic and gets so far ahead of me that I can't see him. More traffic and about 5 to 10 minutes down the road, I see him pulled over with white smoke coming out of his car. So as I'm passing him, I give him the good old finger while blasting my horn. It was a good day. As we said, we're having a really strong showing from the automotive crowd today. I guess there are just so many things on the road that can go wrong when you're flaunting the rules that are meant to keep you safe. And this guy so deserved what he got. Good stuff. I work the night shift at McDonald's. Every night it was really crowded, and there was one moment I'll never forget. A girl and her friends pulled up and had just ordered one medium sweet tea with extra ice. These girls are being real witches. Like the kind of cliché hot girls that are too cool for you, except these girls were on the south side of average borderline ugly. We're out of medium cups, and rather than run back to get some more, I decided to just give her a large cup of tea, and she takes it without question and they drive off. No thank you or anything. Well, eventually they come back like an hour later. They pull up, the driver girl puts it in park, and the passenger girl who got the tea starts screaming at me about how she ordered a medium extra ice, why did I get her a large, etc., etc. All this time, I'm just thinking, well then don't drink it all, sheesh. She keeps screaming until it finishes with her saying, F you, and then she throws the full sweet tea at me. Except she misses. Badly. She was in the passenger seat, and when she threw it, it hit the top of the car door frame, and the whole cup exploded inside the car, covering these ugly witches in a wet, sticky mess. It gets better. The driver, who hasn't said a word this whole time, shrieks in fury now that she's soaked and floors it. Except she didn't take it out of park, so they sit there, engine howling for a good 3 seconds, before she pushes the stick into drive while she's flooring it. There are ugly clanks and not good-sounding noises coming from the car, and they jerk out of view as they're now screaming at the sudden acceleration out of the drive-through exit, crossing the street and hitting a small ditch that took them 10 minutes to get out of. Once they drove off, I went on break and laughed at them the whole time they tried to get out while eating my meal. Sweet, sweet karma. My brother and I were in the backyard throwing one of those foam 3-pronged boomerangs. It was fairly new and we were learning how to use it. The boomerang had hard plastic edges that whistled or something if you threw it just right. My brother and I played for a while and eventually he said something like, "Wow, you suck at throwing this." He turns around to go do something and I threw the boomerang as hard as I can, up and to the right. When it hits its peak, a huge gust of wind takes the thing and launches it 70+ feet across the yard, hitting my brother in the side of the head, hitting his ear and dropping him to the ground, crying. There's a 2-lane 40-mile-per-hour road through a commercial area that's particularly dangerous because people regularly speed, change lanes without signaling, among other things. One day I had a car full of idiot teens in the other lane who thought it would be funny to match my car's speed, no matter what speed I was going, making it impossible for me to get into that lane at any point. They were making it very obvious that they thought this was hilarious. They eventually made a left turn onto a connecting road, and because they were still staring at me, smashed into the sign that was right at the corner. I happily pulled over, waited for the cops, and acted as a witness. As a bonus, they'd stolen that car. This happened to a coworker the other day. We work at a restaurant, which happens to be a theater as well, and a couple walks out on my fellow server. It's a typical $20 to $30 tab, but they forgot their camera. The server grabbed it and refused to hand it over until they paid their bill. Sweet, sweet karma. Also, if you've ever walked out of a restaurant, screw you. An ex of mine was working as a lifeguard at the ocean and was throwing sticks at a seagull. He had his keys on one of those springy bracelet things, and when he threw a stick, it got stuck in the bracelet and pulled off his keys. He had to jump in the ocean to get his keys back before they sank. The seagull watched from the top of the water slide, and from the sounds it was making, I'd like to think it was laughing. I have a story where I was the deliverer of the instant karma. I was about 16 and I was out for lunch with some friends in the brief window I had between school and practice. Service was a little slow, so I had to eat quickly and run to practice. In the restaurant I'd just been eating in, there was a pack of younger kids, maybe 13, who had been causing trouble. They left a couple of minutes before I did, so I caught up to them pretty quick because I was running. They'd decided to control the entire sidewalk with no room for anyone to go around them. An old man was coming from the other direction and not one of them moved. The old man had to walk on the lawn to get past these kids. Then, as he was going, one of the kids silly-stringed him. I saw red and unleashed the mother of all flying elbows on the kid with the silly string right in the eye socket. The kid dropped and I just kept on running. Honestly, thinking back on it, I'm a little ashamed I resorted to violence so easily, but gosh darn it, those kids had it coming. I can only hope that they learned a life lesson that day. I was just starting at the gym a few years back, trying hard to work off the fat that my gamer years had packed onto my frame. I was on the bench doing my workout, low weight, high reps, I think I had about 110 and the bar, and some juicehead walks by and scoffs when he sees me sweating my butt off, struggling through my reps. So champ, bro. So champ. He goes over to his own bench and loads it up with weight. These are the assisted bench machines and not free weights. He pushes out a few reps. I can see him sweating it while I'm drinking some water and taking a break. After 3 reps, he can't push it up anymore, and the bar falls on his chest and starts crushing him. He's flailing around, kicking his legs ineffectively like a roach that's been flipped on its back. I slowly walk over to him and look him in the eyes. He's got this crazy, dying animal desperation on his face, and the veins are practically exploding out of his neck. I take pity on him and help lift the bar back off him and onto the rack. As I'm walking away, I look over my shoulder and say, "Champ, bro." For the record, he thanked me and apologized. I was over it before he even started speaking. What was the hardest prison habit to break after being released? Not me personally, but I know a guy that said after he got out, he just wanted McDonald's. When he got there, he spent 20 minutes staring at the menu trying to decide what to order because he just wasn't used to having choices. Staring at sharp things. Like there's no desire to use them inappropriately, but you're just kind of shocked that they're there and available for use. You might be surprised what qualifies as a sharp object. I remember whenever someone tried to hand me a knife or something to cut veggies, I'd be afraid to touch it. Glass was the biggest thing though. Just mirrors in all the bathrooms. Real ones. I could smash that crap and have a big jagged weapon. I can't believe this Italian restaurant has such a dangerous thing in their bathroom. Stopping thinking of objects as weapons is hard. One of my foster sons came to us from juvie. Every meal his arm was around his plate and he wolfed down his food. My mastiff couldn't keep up. He always ate back to the wall, hunched up. It took my wife and I about a month to show him that no one would take his food and we had plenty more. Funny part is he went into the Marines and did 8 years and got out honorably, and is now working in corrections. I had to win over his trust, and that took time and a lot of understanding on both sides. I've been very fortunate to have great boys that just needed to know someone gave a damn. I always stuck to my word and was always fair and honest. Hard work on the farm and as much fun and care as they need. All of our boys went on to college or trade schools or military careers. I still like having a stash of ramen packs somewhere, even if I'm not going to eat them. Not wearing shoes in the shower. Eating with forks and knives. Having salt and pepper for food. Not always having to watch your back. Being able to get food when you want it and just get up and leave to go for a drive or something. Going number 2 with my underwear up to my thighs to hide my junk. It took me a long time to go back to pants around the ankles. Yet another reminder that prison can really dehumanize people. I can't imagine eating a meal or going number 2 and have that be a moment of horrifying vulnerability. It sucks. I don't even smoke, but every time someone offered me a cig, I would take it and pocket it, even on the outside. On the inside, that's a bartering chip. It took me about a month or 2 to break the habit. I eat fast. I don't sit with my back to the door in public. I always scan crowds constantly. I question why people are nice to me. I carry extra clothes, water, and various other things in my car in case I need them. Not a hoarder, but harder to get rid of stuff. I don't like being away from home overnight. I also quit eating boiled eggs. I overseason my food, and I refuse to drink Kool-Aid anymore. I hoard feminine hygiene products. We were super limited on the number of pads or tampons that they gave us. They didn't give any to the women in holding cells. So in those cells there was dried and fresh blood on the floor and concrete benches, and a drain in the middle of the rooms like they intended to hose down the room, but if they did, it wasn't often enough. I didn't use a fork for a few weeks. I ate everything with a spoon without thinking. It's not the most interesting thing, but I hadn't noticed it posted by anyone else here. Constantly looking over my shoulder. By far the hardest conditioning to break, which I haven't and doubt that I ever will, is the constant pessimism and cautious optimism. You see, when you're waiting to work your way through court, get a deal, and get sentenced, you'll have your dates changed 50 times, hope for certain things only to be disappointed, and any time you're told something hopeful, it doesn't work out. As a result, I never get excited for something until it actually happens. When my wife told me we were pregnant, I already knew from her symptoms that she was, but still, you never know for sure until you take the test. I was obviously happy, but because I'm always cautiously optimistic and rarely show emotion, I couldn't feel comfortable or excited until I knew that my developing daughter was healthy. Even then, it didn't really hit me till she was born. You can apply this to anything, especially big events. Getting engaged, planning the wedding, buying a house, anything. I still hear from my wife how I wasn't crazy surprised or excited to be having a kid. I was actually half of the relationship who was dead set on a kid when my wife supposedly could have gone either way. You just can't get your hopes up or look forward to anything until it's there or has happened. I've been home for over 7 years now with my wife for 6.5. She's truly the catalyst that motivated me to truly change my life and to not give any more of my life to the system. But she'll never know how happy she makes me because she misinterprets my cautious optimism or realism for pessimism or indifference. I did almost 7 years. I've been out for 2 years. I'm 35, from Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a law called truth in sentencing. You do 100% of your time. There are multiple head counts where the guards make sure that all of the inmates are accounted for. This happens every morning at 5 a.m. I felt like I was doing something wrong if I slept past 5 a.m. It took me almost 6 months before I slept past 5. Even now, 6 a.m. is sleeping in for me. It has allowed me to never be late for work and show up every day. I was a substance dealer with no work ethic, and I slept until noon. Ironically, I'm more successful than I ever thought I would be because of these habits. I actually just got poached by another company who offered me a 150% salary increase. Nice to see you, new tax bracket. In 2 years, I've become a model parolee. My life is great. I married my wife last September. I go to therapy for a multitude of conditions that manifested while I was a guest of the state. I was diagnosed with general and social anxiety disorder and PTSD. I was out a few months and I had a panic attack. I had no idea what was happening to me. I was literally paralyzed and afraid. I thought prison ruined me. It did actually make me a better person in general. I'm not praising Wisconsin DOC by any means. The guards dehumanized the inmates and treated us like pure garbage with no hope. They always told people, "You'll be back." I won't be back. People that go back produce job security. They want people to come back so that they can do what they can to steal your dreams. I changed myself. Prison allowed me to step back and really look at my life. I saw who I hurt. I saw who was there for me. I saw who abandoned me. I became focused on change after my 3rd year. I contemplated self-deletion because I wasn't even half done with my sentence. After I seriously thought about hanging my life up, I committed myself to being the best human being I could be. I revolted by behaving, teaching myself things, and being positive. My life is now amazing. I'm surrounded by people who love me and that support me. All of the ex-cons reading this, and people just interested in the subject, that label, cons, is bullcrap. We're human beings with feelings. We can change. Stay positive and stay hopeful. Never give up. One love, folks.
It sure seems like ex-military and ex-cons share a lot of habits. I'm not sure what to make of that.
My best friend did 6 years in prison. I did 8 in the military. We concluded that the wire on his fence was to keep the enemy in, and mine was to keep the enemy out. The comparisons were while I was deployed. I did 3 tours and it was very different than being home in garrison. True, in garrison it's just like living a normal life. But while you're deployed, you're often wondering, is this my last day alive? What's my family doing, thinking, or experiencing while I'm out here? You've got to wait in line for the phone? If you even get to use the phone. Internet was a rare option to even send an email. So don't write how silly it is until you've sat down with your best friend, thankful that he made it out of the system alive, and he's thankful that you did too. Well, that's a sobering thought. The same sense of scarcity, disconnection, and danger that we use to punish our worst offenders is closer than I feel comfortable with to what we honor another group for. And God help you if you live somewhere where you can be thrown into this environment for tiny crimes that you can't afford to defend yourself for, just in order to be a source of cheap labor. Prison system in America is insane. I had to completely change my sense of time. I agree with all the people who said they ate super fast, but then we'd slow walk back from the chow hall, any excuse for a few more minutes outside our cells. I made sure I never consolidated enjoyable things. If I had a snack, I ate it and concentrated on it. If there was something good on TV, I watched it. Now I'll snack while I watch a movie because there aren't enough hours in the day. But on the inside, I was trying to make hours and days go away. I've got a good job now and nice respectable friends, but I still react to confrontational situations more quickly, decisively, and, efficiently than they do. I'm able to pull back at the last minute before I get dangerous, but it's pretty clear that violence is not a tool in other people's arsenal, the same way it is in mine. Taking as long as you want in the shower. For the longest time after I got out, I took less than 5-minute showers. I spent 72 months in prison for a tragic car accident that I'd caused. After I was released, I kept telling my wife exactly what I was doing without her asking. She thought it was funny at first, but after a few weeks of it, she was starting to get bothered. Not an ex-con, but my stepdad has been in and out of prison for the majority of his life. He always said that whenever he gets out of prison, you're so used to it being loud all the time that when he gets home, he couldn't sleep because it's so quiet. Guy I work with said that for the first little bit after getting out, he'd take a leg out of his pants when he'd go number 2. Not sure how common that was. The guy's a fighter though, so maybe that had something to do with it. A guy who worked for me, when things were very busy, I'd often get carry-out lunch for everyone and bring it back to the workplace. This one guy would eat a cheeseburger and a french fries in 2 minutes. Wow. Once I asked him why he ate so quickly and he said, "Well, I spent 7 years in federal prison and if you didn't eat your meal in 10 minutes, you didn't get anything. That 10 minutes included the time it took standing in line to get your food." Okay then. I never said anything to him about it after that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Being paranoid and always looking over my shoulder and never letting anyone stand behind me. Even people passing on the side of me, I'm always turning my head to see what they're doing. When I get food, even if I'm the very last one served, I'm the first one done, and I still stand when I eat around other people. My friend did 2.5 in Florida State Prison. He said the first thing he did when he got home was shower until all the hot water ran out. Because this seems to be coming up a lot, this was about 15 years ago. Tankless water heaters weren't really a thing back then, and I'm not sure if they even existed. And if so, they weren't common in lower-income households. So yes, it was very possible to run out of hot water. There's a major epidemic of ex-prisoners with PTSD that society doesn't talk about. It's part of the reason the US has such a high recidivism rate. Prisoners are dehumanized, whatever issues that put them there are exacerbated, and once released, they have less options than before they did their time. Add to that the PTSD and the never-ending fear of going back, and it's a small wonder more prisoners don't lose their crap and be unable to function in society on the outside. Doing laps. In prison, every time you get time on the yard, you do laps. Seriously, almost every single person does it too. When you get out, it's hard to break that habit. Making prison commissary-only food. Everyone around me thinks it's gross as all hell to throw summer sausages, pickles, cheese, Doritos, Cheetos, and such into my ramen noodles, but good lord, I can't stop and I've been out for 5 years. My ex would sleep a certain way all the time. To me, it seems like he was sleeping as if he was in a coffin, with his arms crossed, and he wouldn't move the entire night for a couple of months. He eventually broke that habit. A somewhat friend of mine did a few years, and the one habit he couldn't shake was distrusting people. He said that people in prison are never nice. If they're nice, it's because of a hidden motive. Up to this day, he still doesn't trust people who act nice or generous or helpful towards him. Gosh, I got out 2 years ago, and I can't for the life of me shake my aggressive posturing. That's all prison is, being hypervigilant, and I would argue worse yet, always appearing indifferent. Like, you could be kicking it with your friends, laughing, watching TV, but even the slightest misphrasing of something or a sudden movement will shift the whole mood of the room at a drop of a dime. So whatever emotion you display has to be instantly shut off, and on a moment's notice you have to be booted and suited. I'd return to my unit on occasion and there'd be blood smeared on the walls from a fight I missed. You didn't look at it. Eyes forward, indifferent. Emotion is weakness, and even though I was secretly panicking, I had to bury and put on as a cold mother fricker. The hardest thing has been to talk without using excessive swear words in every sentence. Never been to prison per se, but I did a few months in county jail. Something I haven't seen mentioned is trading food. When I got out, I asked my girlfriend to trade me her chicken wings for my macaroni. Pure habit. I really could have just gone to the kitchen and got more chicken. That one's almost cute in a way. Now I'm analyzing why I think that, and it's likely because it seems very schoolyardy. Which in a way is another example of how we kind of take prisoners back into a more juvenile or animalistic state, where everything that isn't a guardian is dealt with a very transactional approach. My uncle was in prison for a while, and we've talked a bit about his experience and how it affected him. He has a hard time not being violent. You'd never guess, since he mainly just sits in the corner and smokes, but he's been out nearly 10 years and still always struggles with using his words. The guy cannot stand authority. He tells me that it's hard to listen to bosses when you know you're probably smarter and tougher than them. He knows most people feel this way, but he just can't ignore it. He's taken up professional carving so he can be his own boss. He's really in touch with our native roots now, on account of joining a First Nations gang in prison. Doesn't talk much, I don't know if that's because of prison, but he really only speaks if he wants to. Not the kind of guy who likes to just talk. He doesn't have a lot. He has some sort of abandonment issue or something, so he doesn't want a lot of things to miss if he goes back to prison. For all the time he doesn't spend with people, he's out with nature or doing something in the wilderness. I think it helps keep him calm and feel connected. He's a nice enough guy, but prison kinda messed him up. I think he's going to live his life being slightly disconnected with people. Judging by a few guys I've worked with, taking extreme offense at the word goof or goofy being used in their presence. It's apparently a prison term, primarily in Canada, that refers to people who do awful things to children. In prison, you definitely don't want that name attached to you. It's still pretty weird to have a guy blow up just because you said something they were working on looked a bit goofy and needed to be fixed. Having your head on a swivel, protecting your personal property in an obsessive manner, and sizing everyone up. When I was locked up, I always knew what was going on 360 degrees around me. Only the last unit I was in had lockers with actual locks, so before that I had to protect my commie, paperworks, and books all the time. Most people would fight you to take your crap because that's the respectful way to do it, but cat burglars were the worst. They'd sneak around and take stuff. They got screwed up by everyone when they got caught. It's code. If you want my stuff, come and get it. You don't sneak around to steal it. I've been out for almost a year and a half, but I still constantly size people up. No matter where it is, in the grocery store, Walmart, walking down the street, I still analyze each person and figure out my best course of action if we have to fight. I've been out 8 years and I still eat like a dog. Most prisons give you 30 minutes for your meal, but that includes the walk from your cell block to the chow hall, waiting in line and finding a seat. Normally, by the time I actually get a piece of food in my mouth, I've already got a CO yelling over my shoulder to hurry up. It's really annoying going out to eat with people and gobbling up your meal only to be stuck watching normal people eat for 20 minutes. Hardest habit? Not talking crap to dumb old men who think they're right just because they're old. I hated that in prison. Old guys think they know so much just because of their age. Like, mother fricker, you're in prison. You obviously don't know much better than I do. The easiest habit? I'm never getting top ramen or getting a bowl cut from a Mexican barber again. I find myself hoarding toilet paper under my bed. Sometimes I do it without thinking, and I'll look under there and have 10 rolls of TP. A couple of guys I know, after being out for 5 to 10 years, wrap their arms around their plates and shovel food into their mouths at the speed of light. They're also super defensive of their food. When I first got to know them, I jokingly swiped a chip off one of their plates, and he flipped his fork up and demanded I give it back. It freaked me out a bit. My friend once told me he got hooked on watching news channels and crappy daytime television. He said he also enjoyed listening to AM radio now, even though he knows specific podcasts exist and are more tailored to him. He self-deleted 3 years ago after receiving a 20-year sentence, just a year after finishing a 1-year sentence. So apparently I need to clarify a few things here. At 18, he served a little over a year in prison for moving green herb, got out, violated parole, and got caught moving mass amounts of more green herb and other things, like breaking into homes, petty theft, which was going to send him back for at least 15 years. After the jig was up, he had a while where he was allowed to stay at home, and then he ended up doing self-deletion with a 9mm to the head. He survived the initial shot but died 2 days after going to the hospital. He was a great friend and I knew him since elementary school, top of our graduating class in high school, just too much exposure to the wrong people. Realizing I could just get up and go somewhere, that I could make plans tomorrow from 1,000 different choices. It's hard to break the habit of checking everyone who enters your vicinity. It feels like you've got to mark everyone off as a non-threat. My good friend's uncle did 20 years or so. His habit was how he ate. Everything that he ate got immediately cut, mixed, and devoured quick as all heck. Don't know why, he always said it's how you did it there. You ate and got the frick out as quickly as you could. 2 words. Grape jelly. Not being able to go to the free infirmary when you're hurt or sick. I'm not an ex-con, but I messed around with one for about 3 years. I promise I'm being 100% serious when I say this. After he did 1 year, he came out and had new bedroom preferences. He begged me constantly to do stuff in the butt. He was also really into me going south of the border on him in the shower. Prior to being locked up, he wasn't into those things. He also kept his room ridiculously cold and kept 1 blanket. Pacing back and forth. I'm not an ex-con, but my daughter's father is. He still can't stand with his back turned to people. He's constantly watching over his shoulder, and he eats piles of food mixed together within minutes. I tried to wake him up from the couch to come to bed, and I just about got punched in the face. He paces around our apartment whenever he's looking at his phone or on a phone call. In a restaurant, he'll make sure he has a view of a majority of the people. In a mall, we'll walk near walls and rarely be found in the middle of the food court. But in the end, he does it to protect us. He does it because he knows how rough prison was. He knows that the world is not as peachy as it once was, and will do anything to protect the ones he loves. When my dad got out of prison from a 10-year sentence, we nicknamed him Martha Stewart because he was such a clean freak. His home looks like an IKEA catalogue. He has glass containers for his shoes. He wakes up early to iron, wash, and scrub everything. When I lived with him for a year, I was grounded so many times over leaving water drops in the sink. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.